for our business.
Wait for
Their
it before we.
mother's house is on
It only cost me a
the
master's
next
degree.
to it.
Or cost her a master's degree.
Urban Tiny lives.
So it's a gold line.
It is.
Market, they want $175,000 for that.
I hadn't walked that.
We drove
Oh
through
my
there
God,
actually
that one is so
yesterday.
nice.
It's all
It
kind of
has to
filled for
be.
the first time.
Really?
I know.
Yeah.
I think I would give her $2,000.
We're going to Halloween. That's gonna be fun.
So maybe
For the
my.
Texas A&M game.
I was
Oh, really?
Volleyball game?
watching the people
That will be fun.
It's gonna be a fun night.
What are they gonna do in the interim?
Oh,
Staying
they interview girls.
overnight up there?
We
They're
should
gonna
go up
stay-
there, just go back. We get back on
But
1
they like
o'clock.
coming out
Oh,
here.
they're just gonna
I'm
do
used
like
to
a
going.
weekend?
The wife
Yeah,
says,
like a
as long as you
weekend,
drive
they'll
on,
take it
Yeah.
slowly doing
It's
it,
not a
and
bad-
eventually, because they're,
because we actually have
she's
stuff to do
from
on Saturday.
Remediva.
But
they're,
Oh,
we
so they got-
promised Ryla
oh yeah,
family.
her mom
kid
and
game
dad.
every year, and
Remediva.
that's
Yeah.
the only one that's
Probably-
just good.
probably need a-
Yeah.
Just a
Her
treat
mother-
you or something.
her mother was a young man
Okay.
in Remediva.
I'm taking the
Yeah.
girls.
So-
We have a company tailgate this weekend, and so I told the girls I'd take them. Allie didn't want to go.
At Aggie Park?
No, well, at
company.
A&M
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
up there, but I haven't found tickets yet, so I'm watching.
Who they send it to?
Auburn.
Oh, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah,
Did the girls want to go football game?
yeah,
Oh, they do?
they enjoy it. It's
It's
fun.
fun last.
Aggie football games were fun. I went to Aggie football games. I stood up in Aggie football games
As long as you're on the west side of the field, you're fine.
with all
Yeah,
of
in the
y'all.
shade.
Shaded side.
Yeah. My cousin was an Aggie. I even went to a freshman ball at Aggie. in Aggie.
I got a handful of one of whom is Logan, my son, so and his wife. So yeah, we have the Maroon coming through the house in little forms now. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to start the brainwashing early.
Yeah, well.
But Allie doesn't want to go.
We went to one football game, just she and I with some friends,
Uh-huh.
and so we hit her quota for the year.
Oh, it's good.
She went to Texas. So.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you go.
she did too.
Yeah,
Did you go to the UT Aggie game?
we did not.
You did
No.
not? That
Yeah.
that would be awkward, right?
We'd have to find individual seats.
One girl dressed in one and one girl dressed in
Yeah.
one of the kids.
Everybody on silent.
You
always have to remember.
I don't know, they made me use the new iPhone and now I've had so many issues with my phone.
We don't even have an agenda for this.
So I've turned it on silent and then it's still being.
All of a sudden, it's doing
Yes, we
something.
do.
Yeah.
We do have an agenda.
You didn't print out our agenda?
I'm sorry, here, I have 1,000 of them over here that I made out.
Oh. We need an agenda.
I know, sorry.
We don't have a lot of people, so. Are
It's
we
just the
on
one
yet?
item.
Yeah, she said
Okay,
something
though.
odd.
Wasn't too bad.
I always wonder if that mic works because that's Phil, and I can never hear
He
Phil.
doesn't pull it, neither does, he doesn't pull it close to you.
Well, I finally got on Bob because I
Well,
could never hear Bob either, and they
every-
finally gave him a.
Yeah,
mic
but he didn't know how to use that
Well,
one.
he was doing okay last night. He had to get reminded.
If you were here, it would.
Yeah, well, it kept cutting out too. I don't know if
They
it.
said that the batteries or something was.
Oh,
they stopped
yeah.
saying that something about the batteries.
He
Yeah.
put new batteries in, but we think he put one upside down.
No telling.
That's just thought.
Yeah, if we can just get Phil to sit forward a little bit, we'll be doing good.
Is Scott? I saw Scott walking out. Is he coming back, or should we
He's
get
gonna come
started?
back, but he has to finish wrap up some stuff. So he said he'll come back in whenever when he's able to. So I wouldn't wait up on him.
Okay. Well, at 5:30 p.m., we'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with roll call to my left.
Marcus Fuentes.
Valerie Solis.
Jim Welch.
Priscilla Garrett.
Brian Griffin.
Now we'll move on to item number 3, which is citizens' comments. There being no citizens in the audience at 5:30 p.m., we'll open and close it. Then we'll move on to item 4, discussion on the development agreement policy. Brianna?
Okay, I'll take it
Take
from
it away.
here. All right.
Times have been discussed.
Here we go.
Yeah.
All right, so I know y'all have a lot of slides, but I was trying to break it up for y'all to make sure we can just go through it clearly, precisely. I wanted to give a little backstory on why each of the things that was adopted within the original development agreement policy why it was there and how it benefits the city. And then y'all can decide at that point if y'all think it needs to still move forward or if it doesn't. So we're just going to go through each, and if there's any discussion I'm open for discussion and questions. If I don't know the answer, then I'll write it down and I'll get it back to y'all. And feel free to interrupt me at any point. But there's quite a few slides, I know, but like I said, and I gave y'all notes pages just in case y'all want to take notes, if y'all want to wait till a certain time to stop and ask questions. But like I said, stop me at any point if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if y'all need some clarity on anything, okay?
Brianna, as we get into this, just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page of the format, so we'll go through the presentation, which is very in-depth. I guess, as we bring up questions during the presentation, we can handle that, but do we want to close that presentation and then move into like a discussion of recommendations and our thoughts on going forward, or how do you want to format that?
Since there's so many topics, I would recommend just doing questions and discussion in whenever it comes up in the presentation, because we're going to hit on quite a few different things, and I think it'll be hard to try and circle back around to all of those at the end. So if we need to take a few minutes to have a good discussion on something, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yeah. But if it gets confusing and you feel like that's not the right way to move forward, then we can always change the format as we go through.
Now, this is the one that we developed while we were working on the UDO to coincide with the UDO.
That's correct. Yeah. And I'm going to get into a little of the backstory here just to refresh everybody. So
Spoiler alert.
I know. Oh my God, you're tender here. No. Okay, so how we got here, and y'all probably have heard a lot about this already, but just like I said, a refresher. So the city has experienced a lot of growth, especially in our ETJ. So we needed stronger tools to guide that growth. Although the state has reduced the municipal regulating authority, Texas cities still are allowed to use Chapter 380 agreements and development agreements to manage that growth if the developers want to come to the table with that. On August 27th, the city adopted the development agreement policy, the current one as is an interim until we figured out what was happening with the UDO. The UDO was not adopted, as y'all know, and so now the development agreement policy remains, but it does have some elements that are kind of UDO-like, so we need to look at those and see if they still fit within that policy or if those need to be pulled out or changed, or how we want to move forward with
Or
that.
if they fit within our CZO.
Or yes, so fit within our CZO, yes. And then, so that's where we're at right now. We're going to be looking at the development agreement policy here in this session. And like I said, if y'all have any questions, feel free to stop me. And how I kind of see this playing out is that from the last meeting, we're going to come to hopefully a consensus on what needs to be inputted in the development agreement policy. And then at that point, we can decide, because I know Jim said, well, I thought it was almost going to be more like a one-pager. I think the current one we have is 14 pages. So we can figure that out later, but I would like to see what we want to see in it first, and then we can figure out the format of the actual policy after we establish those.
So continue using ADA policy, however it reads, how we change it. But when we say the, doesn't exactly mean the one we have now.
That's correct. Yeah. So.
Sorry if I asked a lot.
No, you're fine. No, that's what I'm here for.
Simple
Okay, so
question.
now we're here at a workshop, and we're here to find that policy to how y'all see fit. And then, of course, y'all are recommending authority to City Council. So once we've gotten it pretty tightened up, we'll bring that back to City Council to see what they think about it, and if they want to adopt the new development agreement policy y'all bring forward. So. Okay, so first I'm going to kind of get in because we use a lot of terminology, and I know there's a few new people on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I want to get into, let y'all know, like, what's the difference between a development agreement and a Chapter 380, because a lot of times they're used interchangeably, and so it's just to help y'all out a little bit. So development agreements are based on land use and subdivision law. They're used specifically in the ETJ. They cannot be used within the city limits. It sets standards and obligations for that development, and it's focused on orderly growth and infrastructure alignment. So it's basically on growth, infrastructure, and land use. Now, Chapter 380 agreements are based on economic development, based on the economic development law. It can be used inside the city limits, but also used. So once a property decides to annex in with the development agreement, then a Chapter 380 can be instilled within the city limits once it's annexed in. And then it also provides financials, incentives for economic development. And it's focused on jobs, investment, and tax base expansion. So they're two different tools, but they can also be used together. All right, so why is the development agreement policy important? The biggest thing is to ensure orderly development in the ETJ. As y'all know, when there's a property out in the ETJ, we don't get much say on what happens to that property. So by bringing the developers to the table and putting a development agreement on the table, then we can negotiate with that developer to hopefully entice them to annex into the city and develop how we see fit for our city. So that's the important thing. And then it also provides clarity for our parties. So a development agreement policy, we can give it to them. We can say, these are the things we're looking for. These are the things that we're willing to incentivize. And so everybody, and then it's something that y'all are creating and city council will be adopting. So hopefully everybody's on the same playing field when a developer comes to the table. And then it just also defines some standards like development standards, infrastructure standards, and it provides an annexation schedule, which is very important because we want that tax revenue if they're going to be coming into the city limits.
One thing that underscores why development agreements are more important than they used to be, I think I shared this last time this came up, is that the state has passed legislation in the last 6 years, or more than that, 8 years, gradually reducing cities' ability to code in things like brick, colored houses, different types of building materials. None of that's done. Now, many builders have their own interests. They want to sell houses. But still, as you can see, just starting down 90, there are different qualities of homes built. In some communities, they want to ensure there's a certain level of quality. So that's another reason why development agreements play a role is through that process, you can basically say you can circumvent the state code and get a developer to voluntarily agree to things that we wouldn't be able to make them do otherwise in exchange for building, whatever it is they're looking for, whether it's a lot size change or whatever. There's all kinds of variances that they might want to see. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always have to involve 3Ds or amount of money, exchange of tax dollars or anything like that. That certainly can be something, but very often developers aren't necessarily as interested in that as they are in variances from certain building codes.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Like Alsatian Oaks, they will eventually annex in.
They have already annexed in.
All 5
Yes.
plants have already.
The whole property is
the whole
already
property
annexed.
has already annexed.
So has Flat Creek. And so that's a condition of the development agreements, typically. Mm-hmm. Again, it doesn't have to be, but that's one of the things that in the development agreement policy that we used to have. We had annexation as one of the top things. Like you have to be willing to annex.
Before we give you this, you'll annex.
Yeah. You
Don't
have to
tell
annex.
us
So,
you're going to annex.
Yeah.
Heights of Castroville, there was actually a portion right there, that property off of 471 that's
Behind Napa? Yeah.
And so about half of it was in the county, wasn't in the city limits. It's kind of weird. So that's been annexed in. Flat Creek has been annexed in, and Alsatian Oaks has been annexed in. An example of a property where we recently ran into this was the DR Horton property. I believe they bought it. You know, they bought it.
I don't believe they closed on it, but I haven't heard any updates from them.
Now, I was thinking they closed because I knew they'd give me some dates of when they had to close by.
Is that the one on the left-hand side going into town?
No,
That's the one
so
on the-
this is not been,
Another one?
sorry, this has not been developed. It's a piece
Oh.
of property that is to the west of the school property, between
Oh.
the airport and the school,
Oh, okay.
south of 471. So that's an example of a developer that did not want to annex in. And when, before the DA policy was removed, or maybe nullified, staff was able to convey to that developer, look, if you want to do a development agreement, this is, if you aren't willing to annex, we aren't willing to talk. And that's not because that empowered staff to be able to relay that, because that was the understanding from the city council and staff that if they weren't willing to annex, we weren't willing to talk to them. So that just underscores why these things are important to have, so that we can set some ground rules with these developers so that they know what to expect, and we won't waste our time or their time having conversations that aren't important.
Okay. All right, so what's the path forward here? So first, we're going to identify what matters most to the commission. We're going to focus on those key issues, and we're going to hopefully come to a consensus on what we think should be put in the development agreement policy. Define the priorities in clear terms, so make sure that whatever we do put in there, that we establish that language. I don't know if that's going to be done tonight, but that's just a part of this policy. And then also select that format that best communicates those policies. So like I said, if it's a 2-pager or a 1-pager, if we need it to be a few pages long to clearly state what we want, then we'll establish that as well. And then adjust the level of detail to match that format. So that's what we're going to be doing moving forward. So key agenda points for the workshop. So I think I've shared these with you. And so these are just things that are off the top of my head. I went through the development agreement policy as it is right now in depth. And I highlighted what's in there that we can regulate. You know what, I'll get into that in just a second. So we'll go through each of these things here in the future. So I broke it into 3 different categories. So the first category is items that cannot be regulated under state law. So that means we cannot create ordinances to regulate these things. And so those things that if we do determine that we're going to have a development agreement policy, then we should include those things in that policy, because per the state, we cannot regulate those within our ordinances if we feel that we want those things for our city. And so this category 2, items permitted under state law for local regulation, but that we don't currently regulate. So there's things that we've been asking developers to do, and we can put those in our ordinances, but we currently don't have them in our ordinances. So is that something that we want to put in the development agreement policy? Is that something we want to insert into our ordinances? These are things for us to decide. And then category 3 is items that are permitted under a local law for local regulation, but we regulate differently in our ordinances, and that's where I pull out those UDO elements. So that means that we already regulate those within our ordinances, but what it's stated in the development agreement policy is different from what we regulate currently. So those are those UDO elements. So we're going to go through all of those, and then, like I said, questions, just let me know. So first, we're going to go into category 1. So these are the items that can only be regulated through the development agreement policy. We're not allowed to create any limitations or regulations within our own ordinances to do so. So first, process. Yes, we can create a process, but right now within our ordinances, we do not have a development agreement policy section. So right now we don't have where we can just say, hey, a development agreement policy has to go through planning and zoning and city council, because we don't already have that section established in our existing ordinances. So that's why I kind of put it in this, is because this development agreement policy should speak to that. Second is annexation. We're not allowed to require properties in the ETJ to annex into our city limits. 3 is building materials. And like I said, we're going to go into each of these, but building materials, we're not allowed to regulate those. Fiscal productivity analysis, we can't regulate that. Civic facility, and then incentives. We're going to go to each of these, yeah, in depth. So yeah. Okay.
Big words.
But I just pulled them out because, like I said, I went through the whole DA and I said, where does this fall as it currently is, like each section? Because I wanted to make sure that we knew what we were taking out or what we were keeping in. I didn't want to just pull things that maybe y'all felt we should have. So, okay, so first, the planning and zoning review. So the development agreement policy currently requires city council approval, but does not clearly define P&Z's role with that. And so right now we're going to talk about like what y'all think P&Z's role should be in the development agreement policy. Should the commission be providing an advisory recommendation on all DAs, or just those that have zoning implications, because y'all are the planning and zoning commission? And then we also probably need to lay out what that process is going to look like. When is it going to go to planning and zoning? What will y'all be reviewing when it does go to planning and zoning? And yeah, so first question I have for you is, what would planning and zoning review? So I kind of laid out a few things here. So first, it could be consistency with the subdivision ordinance. It could be consistency with our comprehensive zoning ordinance. It could be consistency with the development agreement policy. And so basically identify areas where the development agreement is not consistent with these 3 things listed above, and then give their recommendations. I would love to hear y'all's feelings on what y'all think y'all should be reviewing if the development agreement policy comes to you. So there you go. Y'all have the table.
I'll lead off while we all kind of chew on this a bit. So I think the development agreement is a very powerful tool that we should develop to the best of our abilities for city staff to use in upfront discussions with developers, and have that, as Scott's example, is something that they can back their stances on. The process itself has recently, I guess, kind of changed out of the sake of transparency. We saw our previous P&Z meeting with the development agreement revisions coming to us. Personally, P&Z, I don't feel like is fully educated enough to make detailed decisions on a development agreement. And no offense to ourselves, I'm including me with that group, but there's a lot of legal elements of what can and can't be in there. There's a lot of financial things that all rolls up into one package. And just like your opening slides had a lot of education on it, that whole process would require a lot of education for us to make good decisions. If it does come to P&Z, we also, I think, run a risk of P&Z council not agreeing on all the elements and then it getting stuck in this gray area. However, I do really appreciate the transparency thought behind what we've recently done. So I think that maybe a different approach would be to get a really good development agreement policy established, one that we all agree with the different elements that go into it. And then maybe the process is the developer in the city, which also has direct access to legal counsel and everything when they need to, come up with the best agreement that follows the policy per what the council feels like and everything, and then have a public hearing process for it. Because it's not necessarily just the P&Z that need to be involved in this transparency, it's the public. We want that back and forth. And that's either achieved through a P&Z meeting or through a city council public meeting or something like that. So I think if we looked at maybe having the public hearing in lieu of P&Z review of development agreements going forward, we could achieve the same transparency without added effort, education, and risk of killing deals because of small disagreements on details. Just something that was weighing on me a little bit.
I'm also kind of wondering, because I know there's going to be a committee or whatever we're calling it put together to compare what was in this UDO, and are there parts of that we can move in, right, am I right, into our current zoning that was good? Isn't that what that one they're talking about, having members from each?
So if you're talking about last night's city council meeting, specifically that was for that active transportation grant that we got from TxDOT. That's what that was specifically speaking towards. I know they spoke a little bit about maybe rolling that committee into also like an advisory committee on reviewing our ordinances and updating those. Yeah, and updating those.
Was in the
Yeah,
UDO. So
that is not set in stone yet, but yeah, because I think we need to we have a little work until we get there, because we need to really figure out.
well, isn't this a little cart before the horse then? Because we're going to be looking at stuff that's in our current zoning to do a lot of this, right? Or not?
No, development agreements are always just in the ETJ. Development agreements
Or you're
are
just-
not within our current
I'm getting
city limits.
confused with all of
So
this.
the
This is
development agreements
Sorry.
will, when somebody's in the ETJ, they fall underneath our
Right.
subdivision ordinance.
I know all that part, but I don't know what's going to happen. What if we look at something in here that doesn't, that maybe, are we only looking at what corresponds to our current zoning ordinances?
so there's 3 different categories. There's one that corresponds to that we could regulate within our ordinances, and then there's one that we do currently regulate that differ from what we currently have in the development agreement policy, the current one. So we will be looking at that aspect of it.
So
Okay.
if somebody
Okay.
comes to the city with a development agreement request, they're going to have a specific plan tied to land use. And,
Okay.
and that one of the previous items, which I think is important, is annexation to grow the city limits. So when they annex, that's when their zoning is established because they have no prior zoning in the ETJ or county. So they would be zoning per the plan and the agreement. It all wraps up into one package.
So they would be thinking about annexing based on our current ordinances and everything.
Based on our current ordinances and what's in the development.
And what's,
but-
okay.
in the development
All right.
agreement.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I have to get this right in my mind. Sorry.
What do y'all think?
I don't even know where to start with it. All right. So, as to Jim's point in reference to the public hearing, right? Because we're obviously not too educated on the topic ourselves, which I totally agree with that. But I don't know if the public hearing is. I think it would be the same outcome, to be honest with you, right? If they come in and they're just going to get as confused as we could potentially get, and then that could also be a stall as well. So
Just to things off the top of
Yeah.
my head, something that could maybe be, and it's really hard because I mean, development agreement, it could be all over the place. Because we think like Alsatian Oaks residential, but it could also be something like all commercial, which maybe nobody really cares if it's on the outskirts. Like we want commercial, like
Yeah.
things like that. But maybe, and I don't know if this is something to be addressed in the development agreement policy, but I think what you're saying is that it can be a lot for not just y'all, but also the public to take in for a public hearing. But maybe what Alsatian Oaks did is they did a town hall where people were able, like they did all the big posters, they did all those things. People could come ask questions. I don't know if we can regulate them to make developers do that. I do think it's an incentive, like to say, hey, if you're going to do this within our city, if you want to come to the table, then, and our public or our citizens want transparency and want to be able to ask questions and want to know information, then maybe we say you have to have some kind of public engagement to offer that to the public to ask those questions.
yeah,
So
so
not a public hearing in the sense that it's a legal public hearing.
Formal, yeah, get the timer out and all
Right.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometime,
yeah, so I was reading online earlier today that we could request like a public engagement strategy as part of the development agreement as well. And so just to see from their perspective how they would actually engage with the community, but maybe part of that process is maybe a town hall or something of that nature, and then to us from the P&Z after that. That's and take it from there.
I think when you have town halls, I was sitting there thinking the exact same thing as Jim was sharing that, like, you're gonna run into, if you have a public hearing, you all go through the process of putting a DA policy in place,
Mhm.
for instance. We go through the process as staff to vet the developer's proposal to make sure that it meets our DA policy. That would be step one.
Yeah.
Right? But then they've done that, and then we say, well, now you have to have a public hearing or a public engagement. But people show up and they don't know that we have a DA policy.
Right.
They don't know that the council and you all have gone through and put those in place. You have to educate the public that that actually happened. And we all know, everybody knows, that there's going to be a certain percentage that says, well, I don't like X.
Mhm.
And usually it's growth, traffic, all the things that happen.
Right.
So there's going to be a certain number of people that are going to show up and say, I just don't want it, period. Right. And it doesn't matter what you say. So I do think at town hall, the whole idea of town hall is for that kind of thing where you can, like, the whole gambit of folks be presented with, here's what's being presented by the developer.
And let the developer have to answer some of their questions
Mhm.
at that time.
But I do think that that's probably the order of things. I think you establish a DA policy,
Mhm.
whatever that consists of, whatever it is. DA policies can be literally 3 paragraphs or 30 pages.
Yeah.
Right? They can be as complex as you want them. I don't think there's a need for complexity. I think the one that we had was way too complex already.
Mhm.
And we, staff, shared that concern as it's being developed. But I think that's a process. First, DA policy, then the developer works through just those elements, and before it gets actually agreed to, there's a public engagement, town hall, and then it might go through a process to get ratified by P&Z and then ratified by council. I think what the P&Z's role would be, though, is probably more on the end of making sure that it met the DA policy. Kind of in a similar way that you all do variance requests or some of the other
Specific use permits.
or platting, or some of the other things where it comes to you, and we as staff present to you, here's what your ordinance says, and here's what it meets, and you just basically verify that yes, what they've submitted meets what we require. The reason you might be asking yourself, well, why would we even go through that process? That could just be a staff approval. I think one reason is because when you start to implement policy in terms of actual built environments, sometimes it reveals to the policymakers issues that they hadn't thought of before. In other words, they see something and it meets the letter of the law, but it does not meet their vision for what they thought they were requiring. Does that make sense? So I think that's why it's good to go ahead and run. We could just as easily say it's administrative approval. It met the requirement, you're good. I really do think it's important for it to go through a policy review by the policymakers, even if 90% of the time they're going to meet everything that you ask, because like I said, it will give you an actual visual of how your policy gets applied in a real world scenario to a real development and a real developer. And I have seen many times where that caused the policymakers to realize, oh, you know what? We didn't ever ask about this. We really, for instance, one that I listened to recently was about storm water management. They've been dealing with a lot of flooding, and they realized that their code didn't address that well enough, and they didn't require connections, stormwater connections, like they probably should. That's just one example, but there's many examples.
In that scenario, and I'm just trying to think of this, like if we implement a development agreement policy into code, and then compare it to like P&Z reviewing plats. When a plat comes to us, if it complies with code, we're required to recommend approval. Would a development agreement fall underneath that same requirement if it did meet whatever code said, even if we didn't feel like something wasn't addressed?
That's a great question, and I think the answer would be not necessarily. I think if you come up with something that's valid that nobody here thought of in the DA policy process, that the policy process or any other process, and say, this would be a good opportunity to do X because of the location of the property, because of something else unique about the development that's being put forward. No, I think I don't think there is an automatic. I think that's the whole point, is get the citizen engagement piece, get the P&Z engagement piece, so that the final product meets the needs of the community. Yes.
And I think the reason why that is because there's a state law that says if there's a plat that comes to you that meets all your requirements, you have to approve it. You can't say no because now we want something different. I don't think a development agreement falls under that, because it's an agreement between the two, and that's amongst you and the developer.
Well, until it's agreed to, it's not agreed to. And the fact of the matter is the developer's not required to go through that process. They're doing it voluntarily. So if you say something, if the city comes up with some request and they just think it's a bit too far, they can always say, you know what, we're done. We'll just go back and do whatever.
Comply with code.
allows us
Comply
to
with
do,
code.
right? Which is a lot.
What you
Which is a
got.
lot.
Yeah.
So there's always that piece of it.
Marquez, you want to jump in first, or you want?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm still trying to take this all in.
Yeah, I know it's a lot to digest. Going with what Jim had said earlier, I agree with the fact that as a board, I think we're a little bit lacking as far as the overall information, state law, our current ordinances and everything. But I would say P&Z shouldn't be the point where developers come in and have to go through P&Z first. I mean, I like the community engagement idea. As far as the bones of the development agreements, obviously in your categories, you got categories 1, 2, and 3. If it is something that is regulated by state law that we don't have control over, but we can put into a development agreement, why wouldn't you? You know, but no, I kind of go with what Jim had said earlier. I think that the beginning stages should be something that, you know, a developer's going to come in. They've already dealt with cities all over. They probably have already gone through 5 or 6 development agreements. You know, as we develop ours, obviously we're going to want to look at those and not reinvent the wheel. I'm sure that there's probably some pretty good examples of things that we can take advantage of also. But that's kind of my feelings. I don't think it should be, the P&Z shouldn't be the be all end all. I mean, the transparency part, more people and more segments of the city that are involved, including the citizens, I think will give us a better product in the end.
I mean, I think with some of the process, I guess, is like, okay, is a DA needed? Yes. Okay. And then going from there, public engagement prior to them coming to us. Okay.
Yeah.
Then to us. And then I know we're trying to discuss what we're actually going to be reviewing. But then once that's complete and then, you know, city council needs to review it, they'll review it after that. So that's how I kind of see our discussion heading as far as what the process would look.
Because just as Scott said, it can be something as I don't want to say simple, nothing simple. No, but as you know, I know y'all don't understand every regulation for plating, every regulation for all of those things, but you still review them just to make sure it meets the intention of your order, like, you know, that it meets y'all's ordinances. And maybe that's where you should go with the development agreement, is that, yeah, you're not in there to go look at the legal language. That's not y'all's job. That's not y'all's responsibility, but does it meet the intention of the policy that y'all created? So maybe that's more along the lines, and but that's for y'all to decide.
Did we even have a development agreement before the UDO process started?
Alsatian Oaks was already on the board. Yeah, and
Can I
Oh,
can I
right.
clarify or
Oh,
get
great.
clarification? Sorry, Stella. But it was to my understanding that we didn't have a development agreement for that. That Clay Benford took over all processes of that. He came to the city and asked if he could do all the negotiations for development agreement, and that's why he was. That's what was my understanding of that.
no, that property was outside the city limits,
Correct.
so we couldn't regulate that. So a development agreement was created for Alsatian Oaks. Clay Benford was the bond counsel that negotiated that agreement along with all the attorneys.
Okay.
But it's not that Clay Benford created that. It was a process that was already on the books. Development agreements have been around for a long time.
So
That
there
was-
was something.
Yeah, there was
Okay.
already something.
But
in it.
did you not have one that everybody would look at, or did you, as a developer, like let's say Alsatian Oaks came, and you would work with them to develop their development agreement? Is that what I'm kind of?
I know what you're saying. So Alsatian
what
Oaks
I'm
was the
asking?
first one for this city, and that's why it took such a long time, because it did go through this public engagement. I know because when I very first started, I went to Braden Keller, and it was even before I started. I got the job, and they're like, "Hey, we're having this meeting in 2 days. If you want to come," and I was like, "Sure, love to learn about it." And then I walked in, I was like, "I'm not coming back. Sorry, guys." And
5
here
years
I am.
later.
Here I am.
Because that
Yeah.
was the first time I had heard the word development agreement.
Yeah.
When Alsatian Oaks started.
Yeah,
Let me back up and kind of explain how the DA policy got developed. So that was an iterative process. And we did not have a DA policy, but you had Alsatian Oaks who had already agreed to this development agreement. A lot for staff, for us, we weren't here to shepherd that. Didn't understand fully how and why certain elements of that agreement were agreed to. And a DA policy, ideally, it lays that out. It clarifies, here's what the city really wants. Here are the things that we'd like to see. That can be open space. It can be community centers or accessible community centers. It can be all kinds of things. It can be higher building standards, just name it. It depends on the community, what they kind of prioritize and think is really important. But there wasn't a policy like that in place. So, but yet there were developers. And when I got hired, the developers were like a tidal wave. Everything was happening tomorrow. If you listen to them, like it was, we are going to start building. Like, we need these development agreements in place today. We want them today. And there was just this huge push to get this done, and so it was a little bit of a frenzy, absent policy direction. So I would go to the council, and mostly in executive session. And that it didn't have to have happened in executive session. That's just what the council of the attorney wanted to do at the time. I think in hindsight, we could have built better trust with the community by doing it out there. But it is what it is. But we didn't really have any. The discussions were actually pretty mundane. There wasn't a lot of discussion about incentives or money. It was really all about, okay, what types of things are you looking for? So in those conversations, I would ask council, here are the things that are in the Alsatian Oaks development agreement. So they have underground utilities. Is that important? They have green space and walkable community. And we went through different elements. What's that?
It's dark skies.
Dark.
Yeah. I was just running through the list.
I'll
in my
tell you
head.
that I was out of time. So we went through and identified different elements, but then I would also ask about things like dark skies that may or may not have been in that original agreement with Alsatian Oaks. And we talked about some other things, and different council members and different people had different things about what needed to be in there. And from that, like I said, it was an iterative approach, so that as I was negotiating with the developers, I still didn't have a policy, but I had a list that the council agreed to. And I would do my damnedest to make sure and remind them, hey, remember we talked about this, this, and this, because without a policy that says all those things, I feel it feels a little risky as the city administrator and the attorney. So we'd always go back to the council and say, hey, this is what we're negotiating, this is what we're doing. It would be an iterative process. But out of that, we convinced council that they really needed a policy, and that's where those workshops came about, and we started putting in the DA policy. And much of what was in that policy was intended not only to represent things that were in Alsatian Oaks, but also the things that the council said they specifically wanted, and the things that at the time we were building into the UDO because we understood that that's what the community wanted. And obviously that has shifted some. So that's why we're here today, is to say, okay, we have this policy because they didn't adopt the UDO. Really, there's a lot of things in there that are not. We need to scrape out. We're fairly certain, but it gives us an opportunity to also revisit it and say, okay, what is this still our list? Because there are still developers. There's still land that's right on our fringes that is at risk of development. That more than likely, the folks are going to come forward and say we want to do a development.
So Alsatian Oaks was our alarm clock. It really woke us up, I think, to what was coming at us. Here it comes. Because they've been buying that land for 20 years, I understand. I mean, they started buying that property that came up years and years ago.
Mhm.
And we just sat here
Well,
thinking,
Gutierrez had a suggestion before that. I think before Alsatian Oaks,
Right.
proposed development out there.
yeah, he did.
It just didn't come forward.
Yeah.
So the DA policy is more of a voluntary tool, correct? Or is it an essential tool to have?
For staff, in our condition and situation, I'd say it's essential
Okay.
because of what we're facing. But understand, it's a voluntary mechanism for the developer.
Okay.
Because you have a code of ordinances that the subdivision code that's applicable in your ETJ, and they can just choose to follow your subdivision code. And if the city's happy with that, that's great. That's why you have a DA policy that says, hey, if they want to do something different, that ideally your subdivision code lays out everything that you want to see happen. And then if they don't want to do it, tough luck, right? Now they actually, it's not a tough luck situation, because now they can disannex from your ETJ and they can go into the county, which doesn't have any zoning,
Yeah.
doesn't have any subdivision regulations necessarily. And they can do just about anything they want.
You get the
That
San
used to be
Antonio
the
County.
case.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that was going to be my follow-up question, whether or not it's actually beneficial to you all to have a DA policy, which you
Yeah.
did answer that. So
Yes,
thank you for
absolutely.
answering that. Yeah. Okay. Do you see any issues with, what could we do to kind of, identify ourselves, what could help the issues you've ran into with DA policies? Is it just too much? Is it too little?
Well, there's probably
What's,
some elements in there, like I said, they're more aligned with the UDO, and that's where she put in those three categories. That third category
Mhm.
is the one that I think the council would really like your input on is what of these elements, so there were short blocks, I can't remember, there was just a number of different things that really they're not found in your subdivision code currently. And we want to know, are these things that you want to see included or not? If you want to see them included, what that tells us as staff is, okay, when it comes time to doing the CZO and making updates to it, these are items that we need to put in front of you all in the committee, because they potentially could be areas that we need to change our code, because you're putting it in the DA policy. Now, the reason you put it in the DA policy is because it's not in your code presently. So let's just pick on a real popular one, the ADUs. Everybody loves those. But, so I'll pick on that one, obviously, because I don't think that's going to be one that's clear. But an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, that's mentioned in the current policy because it was something that came up during the development of the UDO. If this body said, you know what, we actually really want to encourage accessory dwelling units, and it's not in our current subdivision code, it's not mentioned there, but we'd like to leave it in the DA policy so that if a developer comes and voluntarily says, I want to do something different than what your subdivision requires, then we as staff can say, okay, we'll go through the list. Here are the things that the city has said they'd really like to see, and it's this list. And the developers never agree to all of them, right? But you get as much as you can in that process. So if it's dark skies, if it's accessory dwelling units, if it's annexation, that's still, annexation doesn't have to be mandatory. It's just something that we've always said was mandatory. So those are the things we would go and say, here's your list. And it's also a way, these are policies that ideally, one of the things that came out of the last time this was developed is there was a comment made that we don't want to give that to the developers. As if we were giving away, like in a football game, we're giving away our plays. This is not one of those situations. This is the type of document you do want to share with the developer. You want to give them a heads up because you want to let them know it's not weakening your negotiation to be able to tell them, here's the list of all the things we want people to see. If you want to go down this road, this is what you're likely to be asked for. It's helpful to both sides to know that going in, as opposed to kind of holding it close to your vest.
Otherwise, it just wastes a lot of your time.
And that, and at that last meeting when all the developers are here, they want them, don't they?
Development agreements?
Yes.
They do more often than not. It's interesting
Yeah.
because, again, ideally, I mean, there are certainly situations, Oregon's a really good example, usually. Like, they'll go into a community, they'll look at the subdivision code, and they just build according to the subdivision code. The lot size, the house type, they'll just meet that. And as long as they meet that, it really makes it easier in a lot of ways because they just submit, they go through the normal process. No special meetings, no special agreements, no escrow that has to be established or any of that stuff.
I think at least from my experience, when developers are coming, they're looking for the development agreement as a way to trade annexation or other elements in order to maybe one, get support of a PID, which is to help their finances work over time, or two, to address lot size requirements because city cash flow does not allow small lots, and Medina County also has a stance on lot size too
Do they know?
in their subdivision ordinance. So
Oh, I didn't
there's
know
no
that.
zoning. I've heard that it's debatable whether it's legal or not, but
How's that possible?
it's in there.
Interesting.
So
I think
they,
it's the size of because if you don't get utilities from city, you have to do a septic. I think, isn't that where TCEQ requires a certain lot
Yeah,
size
they-
for a
Yeah, it's a
septic?
half
Yeah.
acre for a septic, and I mean I know that, but I like for a subdivision, you would think they would go into like a mud if they're like going out into the county or something, which wouldn't require a city. I'm surprised if they have like a minimum lot size of, let's just say, 1/4 acre, because that's a septic requirement is the half acre. I don't know. That's strange. I didn't know that.
Just so we can kick this can down the road a little faster, can we just like start with the list and we can do thumbs up, thumbs down?
Sure.
I mean, if it's agreeable with the rest of the folks, that way we can get a little bit of work
get some
done.
progress. Yeah, I think
we can.
we're on number one process.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I think we
So-
covered the understanding. You have an understanding.
Yeah.
Of why we want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So maybe what y'all review comes after when you see what actually you're looking at. Okay, so yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so first is annexation. We've talked about this a lot. Right now, cities cannot require annexation. It requires the landowner consent for that. And then, so typically we do put those within the development agreement policies first, and I'm going to explain why. Like, why is annexation important? It's so we can control the growth that's coming to our city. That's the first thing, because they do have to abide by our zoning and subdivision ordinance unless otherwise stated in that development agreement. It expands that tax base. So I know people are like, well, if they're not in the city limits, then what do we have to worry about? But those people are still going to come use our parks. They're still going to use our library. They're still going to be doing all those things, but they're going to be out in the county. So we're not getting any of that tax revenue from them. So that's why you want to require annexation, so you can get some monies in to help take care of some of these other things. And then to ensure infrastructure and services is coordinated with our systems. Right now, they can disannex from our ETJ. They don't have to come into our city limits, and we still have to provide water and sewer. So they still have to coordinate with us, but that coordination is definitely way better once they're annexed into our cities, and we can have a little bit of room to give them more regulation on that. And then, of course, the last one is just protect the community character. It's right there at the city edge. I know people are like, we don't care what happens over there. I think if it was something really like that y'all just didn't like, I think people would care. Like, it creates traffic, all of these other things. You know, we do care what's even on our city's edge, because ultimately, when someone's driving, do they know where the city limits of Castroville start and end? Not usually. They may see the sign, but it kind of all blends into one another.
They just think when you cross the river.
Yeah, so first question, should annexation be required? Can we do thumbs up or like, yes? What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's very valuable.
Okay.
To the city.
If
All
they're
right.
in our, so what about somebody that's getting close that isn't in our ETJ? We do that too?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a little bit harder for them to get there,
Uh-huh.
but that's Victory Lane is a good example of that.
Oh, okay.
They're not in our ETJ, they're on the far end, and they had to go in and get parcels of land to connect so that they could annex in.
Oh, okay.
And then another thing is obligations and timeline. I just put that in there because it's something that I think that it's going to have to be discussed, but I don't know if that has to be established during the development agreement policy. Typically, that's something that's negotiated amongst legal. So I don't think, me personally, I don't think that we need to establish that in the development agreement policy, but that's completely up to y'all, what y'all want to see there, if y'all think that it should be. Like obligations and timeline?
So timeline of annexation
Yeah.
itself?
Yeah,
Is that the question?
I would think you would almost need to have a drop dead, like, if this happens and this happens and this happens, then we're gonna need to have you annexed.
what does the current agreement say?
We don't know. We don't have anything in our current agreement that has that requirement.
Because I will say this, in the DA, in most of the development agreements, when the development agreement comes forward, it establishes a time.
Yeah.
You must annex by this time.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the policy. It's something that's negotiated.
Yeah.
Depending on what their circumstances are, or what y'all's circumstances are.
I would think somewhere, yeah, I agree. I don't think it has to be in the actual development agreement, but yeah, somewhere along the line, the city needs to have some sort of a, you know, like you said, these people over time are going to be using our resources. So somewhere along that line, we're going to have to say, hey,
Yeah.
we need you to start chipping in a little bit.
All the from Heights of Castroville, Flat Creek, and Alsatian Oaks. Oh, and even Security Service, that development that happened outside, right next to Service Bank. Sorry, Security State Bank. All of those, they annexed in prior to even start of construction. So, and that's established in the development agreements, and that's typically how it's done. I don't know the exact language that they use in the development because, like I said, that's usually established with legal because there's a whole bunch of language that needs to be put in there. So that's why I don't know if it needs to actually be in the policy, just that annexation is required. So what do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's important to have the annexation covered in the development agreement itself. I don't know that we have to outline specifically in the policy for development agreements when it needs to occur, but because there may be some different timelines that need to occur, so I hate to set a line in the sand.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm
from
trying
that
to think of it
standpoint.
before they put utilities in the
But
ground.
I would think you want it before any infrastructure is built that's being turned over to the city.
Yeah,
Anything that needs to be zoned ahead of getting your C of O for a building or something like that. So it almost ties it up front to plat recordation or even development agreement approval,
so,
which I think is pretty typical
But
the
can
office
that
different.
timeline be set? Okay, we're requiring an annexation, and then they go into talking, and can that timeline be set sometime later on without having it in the DA?
Yeah, that's
I
what
mean,
we're
that,
saying.
that's what you're
It
saying.
doesn't even need to be.
It doesn't have to be there.
It'll be laid out in the agreement.
Oh, okay.
If we can all agree on that.
Yes,
Okay.
that's enough. Okay.
Okay, all right, moving on. So the next thing, so building materials. This is, so building materials in 2019 were limited by Texas state law per House Bill 2439. So before you could say we want so much percent of masonry, we don't want to see plywood on the outside of your homes, all of that good stuff. As of right now, we're not allowed to do that. The only way we can regulate building materials is if they're within a historic district, and the state law is explicit that it has to be a historic district that's already established. So you can't go out to Alsatian Oaks and say, hey, y'all are in a historic district now. It has to be one that was already established prior to this coming on board. We just have to decide, is this something that's important to us? Why does it matter? Typically, durability and maintenance, better building construction typically means better, longer lasting homes. Community character. I don't know if y'all have driven down 35 here anytime recently, like all the way up from let's just say Divine up to Southtown. It's just like all those really that's not good quality construction. Yeah, and then property values. Of course, if there's lower property values, then that could start bleeding into the city, and then fiscal sustainability. So just make sure that there's not blight, redevelopment subsidies, or taxpayer things that happen in the future. Oh, sorry. So currently in the development agreement policy, we have where commercial buildings require an 80% masonry requirement and a 70% glazing on the ground floor. And then residential, it just says list of approved materials required in the DA, and then variations of building and roof lines. So this is where first y'all are going to establish if y'all think that needs to be regulated in development agreement, and how in depth you want to get with that regulation. So then I'll open it up for discussion with y'all.
If we reverse back to the subdivision policy, does the subdivision ordinance regulate any of that stuff?
No, we're not allowed to as a
Okay.
municipality.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in the policy itself, would it just be something that we could just snapshot that in the actual policy?
So this is what's currently in the development agreement policy. Like I
Okay.
said, I don't know if we need to be like that. This is really for y'all to decide. Like, do y'all want to be this in depth, or is it just like, hey, during that DA policy, we would like to see an higher, better building materials than what's currently allowed per the Texas state law. That opens it up for a lot of negotiation. What is better building materials? And that's why it kind of lists like what those could be. But that's really up to y'all what y'all want to see in the future.
What is glazing on ground floor?
That means like windows.
A window.
Oh,
Yeah.
windows.
Yeah, glass fronts.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, this one hits on your comment there. Do we want to dictate specific elements or
Keep it broad.
give them flexibility? Kind of, in my mind, it's like tell them the ingredients that could bake a cake, not specifically what kind of cake we want, because each site is different. So there may be a site that could offer up a nice park or a nice baseball field complex or something like that. Or there may be one developer that has a specific product that is fits a high end, but it doesn't involve masonry. It's some form of board and batten that looks nice. So I think in general, I like the idea of putting the honors on them to be creative and make a presentation to city staff, council, and ultimately the public that sells a vision that benefits the community and pinpoints those. Well, I think it comes back to, do we go into a detailed wording of what we want, or do we present more of a list that says, hey, these are the things that are important to the city of Castroville. Go formulate your first plan of how you're going to benefit the city through annexation and development. Well, annexation would be one of them, but through this development agreement, and then come talk to us. Because I always had a little heartburn with the development agreement process that we developed through ahead of the UDO, because I thought it was just a little too In the weeds, yeah.
Yeah.
So let them present to us what they consider goes above and beyond what?
It gives them a general
A
outline.
general
but don't-
outline.
So you
Don't
would,
say you got to use hardy board or, on 95% of it, or you got to have metal roofs on all your houses.
Yeah.
If you get into that,
So it could-
developers are going to go, what?
Yeah, it could be
Yeah.
really something so general. Like we would, these are going to be under like what we would like to see, and it's higher building standards for both residential and commercial. And then they bring that to the table, just like Alsatian Oaks did the same thing. They provided sketches of what their retail was going to look like. They had a layout they had sketches of what their homes like were typically going to look like. That may vary after. That may vary after everything, as people are starting to build and what's available or what's needed on the market. But those can all be closed in that development agreement. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be within the development agreement policy.
Okay, but who looks at this list? They give us a list of 12, 13 things.
Mhm.
Who decides that's what we want?
We'll see. That's what we're
that
going
would be part of the process.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
speaks back to
It would come to
going to
us.
city
again.
staff,
It would, and
then
then
going
to us.
to us and or council, and then having a public presentation forum or whatever.
Mhm.
And they've got to get through that whole process, presenting those points to get ultimate approval.
So, okay. I think I got good direction
So
on that.
it's
If
a builder-
we can
A
agree,
builder's presentation to us of what they want to see
I think
first.
if what I envision for the language would literally, like I said, it's like a column of what do we want to see, and it would be higher building standards for both residential and commercial, and then let them bring that to the table for us.
Yeah, because they may bring forth something that we hadn't thought about. And then,
Yeah.
because if you set a standard, that's what you're stuck with.
Yeah, that's true. Like, there's a lot of those really beautiful farmhouses and stuff. They have no masonry on them, but people still love that style. They love the look of those. So it could be something outside the box that maybe we just can't envision right now. So.
And a lot of them, I feel like, come to the table first when they formulate their team, get their attorney online. They're like, all right, first question, what has worked and been approved in the past with the city of Castroville? What do we need to look at? Which this list would provide that, plus examples, which Alsatian Oaks set that. And a lot of times they try to follow that or, up the ante so that they can negotiate something different. But that precedence in the list of what to expect helps up front.
Yeah, generally, if you didn't know this, development agreements they're public, in the public realm. So they're available to the public, and generally the developers, one of the first things developers are asked is, do you have any development agreements that you've already done, and can I have those? And we say, yeah, they're out on the website, you go pick them up, and we'll send them a link.
Nobody wants to reinvent the wheel.
No, well, yeah, it just gives them.
And they don't want to have to go any farther than they have to.
I always tell them, it's kind of like the dock worker would tell you, past success is no indication of
Yeah.
same kind of thing. I'm like, no, that's what we agreed to. It's not necessarily what they're going to agree to.
Yeah.
But it does give them an idea.
So do you already have a list like that? I mean,
What do you mean?
well,
Of what? Of the building materials?
yeah. Do
we
we,
can get
do
them.
we?
There's other cities have them. In your current DA policy, I think it says, does that have a mixing requirement?
That's what this is. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it
Yeah, I
says.
think that's
Says
where they
now,
came
Yeah.
from.
So we do have this already in the current development agreement policy. In our current development agreements, typically there is a page in the back. It's an appendices. So if you look at, I sent y'all a development agreement just so if y'all wanted to look to see what it was like. In the back, there is an appendix, an exhibit that shows building materials and building standards. And I mean, it's crazy. It gets down to literally how many plants need to be planted in each front yard.
Yeah.
So, you can regulate, like I said, you can regulate 80% masonry, but really when it comes to the development agreement requirements, they get down into the nitty gritty too, because a lot of times they also want that for their community, and they establish those also within their HOA.
Yes.
So-
I'll tell you how that happens. It's what the ground is set, but going a little bit further, they keep in mind there's so much that we can't do by state law. When they say this is what we're going to do, and they tell you this down, like they'll give you a plan for their neighborhood, then the best the best practice is to take what they gave you and say, okay, you said you would do that, perfect. I'm going to put that as an appendix in our agreement, and I'm going to hold you to that. Because you can't hold them to it in any other way. It's not, they're not required to plant a certain number of trees on a certain They don't have to do any of that. But if they tell you up front, so we had a very, it's a development didn't happen. But they had a builder, and the builder had given us all these, this is what we did, this is what we'll do. And that's exactly what we did. And it got very convoluted, but it was all, they actually provided all the information. We didn't come up with that. They said, here's what we're going to do. It was great, perfect. And then we made some minor tweaks where we thought it was necessary. I think that, what was it called? Otis Jones.
Oh, the cobblestone one?
Cobblestone.
So yeah.
Yeah, so they already have an idea, so we may go in and look at it. And
But
tweak.
that doesn't have to be, I'm sorry, that doesn't have to be reflected in your DA policy. Again, that goes back to the negotiation. If they're willing to do something above and beyond what y'all asked for, great, perfect.
So how will you word that then? How
I'm
would,
just saying higher design
Yeah,
standards.
higher, and I'll probably chat GPT this. No, I'm just kidding. But higher building standards, yeah.
Accepted.
Not even
Yeah.
mad at that,
Higher building standards for both commercial and residential. And then, like I said, that brings them to the table. So it's just like a bullet. They know that's what we're looking for, and then they can bring their ideas to the table for us. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. And then so moving on, so I think that's a yes for that one, and I have what I need for that. Okay, so fiscal productivity analysis. So how can this be regulated? So this, of course, is not enforceable by ordinance, and it's only enforceable through development agreements as a negotiated condition. Why are they why is this important? It just establishes long-term financial health, smarter infrastructure investment, avoiding unfunded liabilities, encourages higher value projects, and protects residents and quality of life. So, and Scott, I'm sure you have a better idea of what, because I mean, I know what this is, but it's hard to explain what it is.
I was going to suggest,
Yeah.
if you really want to geek out on the discovery of the book, Strong Talents, it's not something that I necessarily agree with every word in that book. But his whole premise is that the suburban sprawl that we've watched happen in all of America has led to unsupportable extension of infrastructure. Because generally speaking, you cannot pay for the water and sewer and the streets with the revenues that you get from those developments. They don't pay for themselves. And so he argues that to be responsible, you need to do a study like this on every development that comes and make sure that they're fiscally sound. I don't think it's realistic, frankly. I think it's a good idea. He would argue very passionately and has nationally at different conferences that I've been to, that it's something that's totally doable. It isn't. In my experience, developers aren't going to go to that extreme. That they'll do a PID analysis, PID bond analysis for assessments, right? But doing this and expecting the development to be self-sustaining is a very unusual requirement. And beyond that, there are other ways to get there. And that's kind of what the UDO is trying to do in certain parts. And I don't want to label it as a UDO thing because I don't want people to have a bias against it. But one of the things that it did that I don't think your current code requires is inclusion of commercial.
That's what I
So
was
the way
thinking.
that one of the things that we're going to, as staff, encourage you all and anybody else that gets appointed to look at these things is to really look at your CZO and your subdivision requirements and your land use planning and try to incorporate mixed uses and not be afraid of high density if there is an accompanying amount of open space. Because high density kind of has a negative word, but higher density in an area that is mixed with areas that are open, it concentrates value and reduces infrastructure, right? But it doesn't do it, if you do it correctly, if you plan correctly, it won't do it at the expense of quality of life, of all the things that you like. So that's kind of what the UDO was trying to do, was balancing, looking at those types of strategies that put the right kind of value into the project without sacrificing quality of life. And giving illustrative examples of here's what that would look like. So that people can see this is how your parking would be, this is how your storefronts would be. And all of that was intended not to be overly dogmatic, overly restrictive, on developers was really meant to be, one, ensure quality of life, and two, ensure long-term value. So that's something that's missing, but I think this, if you were to ask my opinion on what you did, fiscal productivity analysis is kind of a bridge too far. And not only that, but your staff, who's gonna check the math?
It's all projection.
It's all
They can put
guesswork.
whatever number, like this amount of sewer line costs $3, and I'm like, yeah, sure.
That's the thing. We've all seen it. Like, people will build in inflation adjustments that are always wrong. Always.
Yeah.
Always. They're never right. And that's kind of why I tell council, like, I forecast all the time, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But I can tell you this, every time I build a forecast, it's wrong. It's not going to be
It's
what
not
I
gonna be
say
right
it is. It might be close, but it's either going to be too high or too low because it's not exact. And the further you take that out in time, the less accurate you are. You could be next 3 to 5, you can be pretty good 3 to 5 years. But these are asking for fiscal projections for 30 years, and there's nobody on planet Earth that can project 30 years out accurately.
How do you keep it even from stopping? Maybe they get so far and then something happens and the whole thing collapses.
COVID happens.
And
What
yeah,
happens to your
and then,
commercial
and then you don't,
or your
then you don't
offices?
have anything.
Work from home.
Yeah, that's right. You can never predict the future.
I think it's
so.
more about land use planning, frankly. I think if you land use plan, the problem with that is, and I know, like I said, this concept of high density it scares people with good reason. But high density is not meant to be, 80,000 people living on top of each other. It's a higher concentration of density
In one area.
mixed with, in one area, mixed with appropriate land uses like open space dedication requirements, things like that, town squares, other things that if you were to take the same amount of density and spread it over that space, you just like for suburban sprawl. This avoids a suburban sprawl. I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on my soapbox.
Yeah. I agree. I think this is unrealistic to expect the developers to provide it. And to your point, Scott, on the land use requirements, where we were headed and what was being put in, I feel like it's important to do what you can to grow high value, let's say commercial property, but in the appropriate spot. And a developer's not going to see that in the middle of a cornfield or in the middle of a subdivision, but they're going to see it next to roadways. And so if you have a properly planned major thoroughfare plan that goes with an overall future land use plan, the vision of those commercial centers starts to come together, and the developers see that when they're running feasibility on the property, as opposed to, hey, I've got this subdivision. Oh, now you're going to force me to put 2 acres of commercial in the middle of it. It's just a different vantage point.
When you bring up a point that really we've been hammered by, and that's the lack of a proper transportation plan. We have one.
And the future land use plan. There was something that came up last night at the city council meeting, and our future land use plan is not even up to date with the current one that we have. So planning and zoning will be looking at those things in the future, thoroughfare and future land use. Because you're right, that's really, those things you can hold people's feet to the fire. Thoroughfare, even if they have to abide by your thoroughfare plan, so you can put those streets out, and so you can get the commercial where you want it to be. So
I do think it's important, back to this question here, for the development agreements and the city to be fiscally minded on the infrastructure they're taking over, though. And then also our development standards to mandate infrastructure that can add as best as it can support itself by the development around it. So as an example, something, small blocks add street. Well, that adds maintenance cost, to the number of lots you get when you create that small grid pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess one question off of that, it's not mentioned in here, so I'll just bring it up now. Like, has it been discussed with the city about requiring private streets in developments?
yeah, we haven't
like-
had that discussion. It hasn't seemed like, because private streets, they don't have connectivity. And overarching, when we had those meetings over here at LSAS, when it was upstairs in that upstairs room, and the ESD came and the school district came and the fire police, who else was there? Oh, TxDOT. All of them were like, these subdivisions that are closed off and don't have connectivity, that's what's killing y'all's traffic right now. That's what's killing y'all's traffic, because You know, right now people can, downtown Castroville, if there's somebody stopped at that stop sign, they're probably going to go to the next street and go take a left at the next stop sign. So I think that's the reason why we haven't addressed anything like that, is because it doesn't help with connectivity, and it doesn't help with those things, is what ESD, TxDOT, it just creates more traffic because they're all dumping out at one spot onto the highway, and it just creates a lot of cluster. So, and that's just the overarching theme that we've seen the past few years. Now, is that changing? We don't know. And if that's something y'all want to see, then we can always include that. So, yeah.
I was curious on the item itself because I know that the county is big on that.
Yeah.
They do not want any more streets to take over for maintenance. And so if you are going to lay out a community that implements private streets, whether they're gated or not, obviously you don't want your major thoroughfare major thoroughfare of the development to utilize a street that has to be maintained by the residents of that HOA, but the pods of development could be private. You know, so it's kind of
I think that's something that you also consider. We would look to the policymakers to say, is this something that the city should consider?
I know in San Antonio when they started doing that, and speaking from a law enforcement perspective, because that's what I did in San Antonio, those were the biggest headache neighborhoods that we had because, I mean, just access wise.
Where the
like
gates.
Brandon was saying, you know, you could never get in, and you know they're like, oh, here's your code, like, or you'd sit there for 5 or 10 minutes waiting for your dispatcher to try and find a code for that particular community. Those were gated communities.
Yeah.
But then it ran into a situation where a couple of neighborhoods took down their gates. They still had private streets. And then when it came time to fix those streets, I mean, you would knock your eye teeth out by the time, you know, driving into them because they became potholed. And so it became a problem for San Antonio. Now, I don't know if they've since addressed it. Now, we're talking probably 20 years ago when they first started popping up in the northwest side.
Have we had any even suggest that around here yet? No?
It's the first time it's come up in a public meeting where besides the county wants to talk about it. Well, going back to your fiscal productivity, I heard you say something, Jim, I'd just like you to kind of clarify.
Yeah.
What would the wording be you would recommend in this DA policy for that?
For being fiscally minded in the development agreement negotiations. I don't know that you write it in there specifically, but maybe it's reflected in the wish list.
Well, that's what I mean. What would that wording look like in a wish list?
So it would be the elements that.
GPT.
Throw out 5 words and I'll make it happen.
I mean, I'd have to think about all the different scenarios to give you all-encompassing wording, but I mean, it's an element of like the private streets not taking on. Basically, the premise is not taking on infrastructure that is onerous on the city, and the development, you know, is obviously not going to pay for that or help with that maintenance. I mean,
So
I don't know if that
development-
covers your
it's
question.
Going back to what you were saying, but not being as anal about it, I guess, it's basically providing a generic statement that says something along the lines that the proposed development, the revenue, the forecasted revenues from sales and property taxes in utilities should be sufficient to cover the costs of maintenance of that development. Something along those lines.
I think that's one way to word it. I would maybe take it a higher level and just say in it, as we put this document together and then as we look at any future code modifications, we keep that as an underlying principle
So fiscal.
so that we try to set the city up so that's, you know, able to take care of itself and not creating more streets like we have now that we can't take care of.
Yeah.
Could it just be something, just a statement as far as be prepared to provide fiscal stewardship, whatever, as part of the negotiation process, or just something along those lines, just so it gets them to think and have some, and just prepare something to provide as a just in case, but
Yeah, just kind of like the building materials. You said we want higher building standards, but we don't dictate what that looks like.
Right.
Provide us what you think that looks like, and
Yeah.
we'll see if we agree to it or
Cash
not.
and bill, we believe new pays for new. Fiscal stewardship would be something like that.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, I can bring back some language and we can kind of mull through that a little bit, so, and see what we come down on.
Okay.
But that's a thumbs up for everybody to have
To
something.
have something, some kind of statement in there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So civic facilities. Okay, so Texas law only allows parkland dedications and fee, and it has to be in proportion to the subdivision's impact in that community. And requiring other civic tracts like schools, libraries, all of those things exceeds ordinance authority unless they're voluntarily addressed in the development agreement. So why is this important? I think most of y'all know that civic facilities create neighborhoods and create places, and so that's usually for community gathering, supports their daily needs, provides walkability and accessibility and long-term flexibility. I know through the UDO process we talked about this a lot, just because you have a neighborhood, and even with Alsatian Oaks, it's not always going to work out. Alsatian Oaks, we had agreed to have them provide land for a school, for an elementary school. The school decided they didn't want that land, so it went away and it turned into just residential, and then they had to accompany that with open space requirement. So we can't always dictate this, because if the school is not going to bite at it, then we can't force them, but it may be something good to where they're looking and thinking about it, because maybe that doesn't look like a school, but maybe a church in the future, or just a nice park center, a pavilion. There could be other ways that can be handled, not necessarily a school. So let's see. The current DA policy requirement, this is the language from there, that each neighborhood must dedicate at least one public tract, a minimum of 2 acres or 10% of land intended for future civic uses such as schools, libraries, or meeting halls, and may serve as open space until civic use has been developed. So that's what the language is right now, but we're here to establish if that's what y'all want to keep in the development agreement policy, or if that's something that we want to take out, or if we want to keep it real broad. This is open for discussion.
10% is really high. Just if you have a parkland dedication in addition to the civic space, 10% is really high. A minimum of 2 acres would make sense. But going like for Alsatian Oaks to 200.
Yeah, I think, I don't know.
If you have hundreds of acres, that becomes a lot of acres.
Yeah, it adds up.
And then, of course, we already require parkland dedication. In our subdivision ordinance.
So that I'm clear, when dictating this, or at least putting this in the agreement, this would set the builder up saying, okay, we're going to set aside lot number 1. Is the city then going to be obligated to building on that, or is the community, that neighborhood, going to have to say, oh, we're going to build a community center? Who's going to be responsible for building on it?
So currently, like with Alsatian Oaks, so one was the school. So that fell through. The school didn't want that, so that reverted back to residential, and then they had to do the appropriate open space for that. The second part was actually a public service property that they dedicated, and I think it's about 2 acres, if I'm not.
Correct.
Yeah, about 2 acres. Right now, that acreage is the city's. They already dedicated that over to the city, and we can use that for whatever we see fit. So we're thinking.
No, that's not true. Right, so just to answer your question, that all would be handled in the development agreement.
Okay.
Generally, that's a case-by-case negotiated aspect. What the policy would simply state is that, again, this is just a wish list. You're not gonna get everything on the list, but it would say that one of the things the city's gonna look for is dedication of civic space, and you establish whatever the quantity is. In the case of Alsatian Oaks, there's specific language in the contract that says what that space can be used for,
Yeah, I noticed they had a couple
that
of
kind of
little
stuff.
kitty parks.
But that's not necessary. I mean, that's unique to that contract. Each contract will be different. Obviously, what the city's going to try to do is not put guaranteed timelines or strings. We're going to try to agree to as little as possible, in part because the city may bid no notice, or we bid or win and do it. So we don't want to commit to that.
Right.
And you don't want to legally, you can't obligate a future council either.
No, I agree with, having a dedicated civic space set aside. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. Every neighborhood should have something there that's walkable, accessible, and that kind
Is
of
there a
thing.
minimum, my question would be, would there be a minimum size that you think would be appropriate? Keeping in mind that there may be, as we get there may be other open space, you have a parkland dedication. But in addition to parkland dedication, you may have open space requirement you might consider.
So this would be in addition.
In
Yes,
addition
it's
to
a-
the
They already have their
Addition
parks parked in there. This is anything.
That's correct.
Like-
This is for civic use. So again, it could be schools, it could be churches, it could be a library,
Community
or any
center.
other
police
civic
station,
purpose.
fire.
As we get bigger,
Oh.
a community space could be maybe an annex for the city for, maybe
Sure.
small, simple stuff. You can
Sure.
come pay your bills here. You don't have to come all the way into town, something like that.
Sure.
Brianna touched on it. First, you said civic, and civic is usually the city. Then you said fire. Fire is not part of the city. So at what point do you say 2 acres is for civic, but the police don't want it? Now the fire, do they want it? Does the SD want it? So do we want to do civic for the city of Castroville only, and then another 2 for ESD personnel services? Because the farther you
I
go
don't
out
think we
east,
should get that specific.
well,
Well, we
that's
don't negotiate, we don't negotiate for ESD.
exactly.
Well, I'm just saying we
The
are not empowered to negotiate for ESD.
The only concern being that I was on that side is because I was in a lot of privy to a lot of those meetings. Is I would further you go east, the longer response time is going to be because of traffic. I know when Alsatian Oaks was being talked about, they wanted the fire in there for that reason, so they could put like maybe one bus, one truck, during peak hours, separate the two. That way, if something happens, they can go their separate way, be there quicker. Because that was just prior to being staffed, because we're still volunteer at that time. So I know we don't negotiate for them, but that's why I just want to make clarification that we don't have emergency services on that side of town
Well,
during rush hour because it really gets tiny.
Go back to
goes
what
up.
Scott's basic premise was,
Right.
like, what is the minimum? And I guess if you could ask, like, how big is the lot that the emergency services building right behind McDonald's? How big is that?
It's a
is
quarter
that
lot. It's only 2 lots.
Two
It's
lots.
2 lots.
Yeah.
So, say what, half an acre maybe?
I think it's 4 because it's 8 on a block and it's 8 on
You're-
half the block.
You are right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You are correct.
So it might be-
I mean, just as a visual, I mean, if you took that footprint and put it in something, what are we talking? Are we talking,
I know we're
is that, it says minimum 2 acres, so, I mean, that's pretty sizable for
It
a
is.
Yeah, so it's fine.
emergency services building or for a satellite office or something. Minimum 2
Generally, like I
acres.
said, generally 2 acres is a good number for a civic facility. But back to your point, I said we don't negotiate for fires, but again, we did put a school. Now, I think that came out of the public discourse that took place with Alsatian Oaks. That's probably why they included, because again, we didn't have a DA policy at the time. I think I'm just piecing together what happened as a result. So that's probably how that got built in. So I think that's one of those discussions. I think that's a term that probably needs to be in the agreement that says that when we say the civic space, whatever the quantity that's donated, civic space includes these definitions, and it should include fire, police, school, church. It could be a lot of different things. Even if those are things that are not currently in the purview of the city can then empower those other organizations to utilize that space if it's not, if the city doesn't do it.
So could we take out, just say at least one public tract and take out how big it has to be or not? Leave it in.
I think you should establish a minimum size.
A minimum size?
Just that,
2 acres
because they're gonna
sounds
want to know
big.
what that minimum is.
Yeah, 2 acres is a pretty good chunk. I mean, for a building. I would be fine with 2 acre minimum.
I would say like what Public Works is on right now is probably about 2 acres because it takes up 6 lots, and I would say that's pretty close to like a 2 acre lot right there. Because what standard city block size is a little less than 3,
At a third of an acre.
yeah, a little less than 3, so 3 acres total. So,
Right.
You have 8 lots on
On-
2.7.
right.
Yeah.
So whatever that is.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
yeah, you can do 3.
Just under 3 acres.
So I like the idea of a development weighing in the need for emergency services, maybe city services and those types of things. I would love to see a church on every corner, but when you look at a church, I mean, that's more of a private thing. The city is not going to establish a church. So if you set aside land for that, I don't see how it eventually becomes a church, because somebody has to own it until a church buys it.
Yeah, so it would
Right, or-
probably be-
Yeah, it's a definition. Again, we're just defining what civic space would be to clarify for the developer what could go there. The way, the instrumentality of how they actually end up becoming a church, that'd be a long process, and it would have, basically, the city would have to determine that it didn't need the space, because it belongs to the city first.
Yeah.
And then, depending on the size of the space, school doesn't need it, fire doesn't need it, police doesn't need it, city doesn't need it for anything they need. Then you have this lot, and you have an agreement that says it can be used for these things. You check everything off, the only thing left is a church. Well, then you see if there's a church that wants it, and then they buy it. And that would be what that is.
So this seems like just do a simple thing here and have a list in that. We keep
Possibilities.
talking about the
But
list.
that wouldn't
We
be in
have-
the DA, again, I want to keep it high level, just like you did it before.
But even in the
There.
appendix, I mean,
well, the DA policy even has a section for definitions, and
so,
that
yeah, that's what I'm
to,
saying.
and because the developer wants to also have some input on what that could possibly be, and so just like in Alsatian Oaks, it has like it could be this, or this, and so that would be negotiated at that time, and that definition would be put in the development agreement.
So for the policy, we're okay with each neighborhood must dedicate at least one public tract, minimum of
2
2 acres.
Do it.
Are we okay with that?
Is everybody okay with
I'm good.
Oh, well,
Well, I'm just trying to think of a smaller development, what that could become a
Oh.
higher percentage.
Well,
of land.
I'm not too worried about that, simply because if it's.
But it's a negotiation piece. They don't have to. do
Yeah,
this.
and
That's
it's
true.
2 acres really is not very, it may be a large percentage of that tract, but 2 acres is not a big, like, for a civic space.
Because once you
It's
get
not
a building
standard
that
amount of space you need.
once you get a building that requires 80 people, you get X amount of parking lots.
yes.
That's where your land
Yeah.
gets
Right.
taken up.
And,
it
and
gets
with this being the
small-
premise of, hey, this is an item that you could pick off the menu to implement.
We didn't do it, so out, the Heights of Castro is a great example. We didn't, they're not a civic space. It was too small.
It's too
There's
little.
parks, there's commercial front. We agreed to certain things and not to others. They gave us gridded streets. They gave us a park. They gave us some off-site improvements, and they did the commercial on 479. Those were the things the city ultimately got out of that deal, in addition to the dark skies and all the other stuff.
So when we look at this and kind of maybe this is back to the process, giving the ESD, the police department and you know the schools, hey, this development is coming. Do we need to look at maybe like involving representatives in the discussions so
We
that
typically do. I don't know that needs to be your DA policy. That's just something staff does.
staff does that?
Yeah.
We do that as a coordination with every development. We talk to Textile, we talk to, there is a process that we go through to inform the ESD that it's coming.
Okay.
Number of houses. So that already happens.
And typically the developers do too. They really do. I know, especially for textile, they have to go talk to them, and they have to do. So they also do their processes to go through that.
They love textile.
As we
Yeah.
move along, we can help you develop this definition list.
Well, we talked to the school district early on because we want to know, we don't always know what they want to do. That's one of the frustrating pieces because they aren't very quick to respond. It's also, the fact of the matter is they have really paid a high price for the land they've had to go acquire. And if they had the partnerships like we have with them in those places, which is largely like Bear County. Well, Bear County isn't worried about MVISD. They just aren't. It'd be great if they were, but they aren't. And so MVISD is always like second fiddle, coming after the fact, going, okay, we got how many houses?
Yeah.
We got how many students? And they're having to beg for land and pay a really high premium just to provide services that wouldn't exist but for that freaking development, right? So we try to, we include them up front as a part.
Okay.
So we're good on that.
Okay. All right. So incentives. Everybody loves this word. How can it be regulated? Of course, it's not enforceable by ordinance, and it can only be negotiated in the development agreements. Why are incentives important? Of course, it's just a give and a take. So you want all these things that we're talking about, you want a developer to come to the table with those. Well, really, they're only going to come to the table if there's some kind of incentive structure. I don't know how in depth that needs to be, but they want to know that the city's here to talk with them, to negotiate with them. And if they provide some things that we really want, that maybe we'll also give them some incentives on their side. It's just a give and take. Right now, let's see. So developers seeking incentives must provide design and amenities like building materials, public amenity upgrades, park trails, civic spaces. The incentive program process, the development agreements allows financial incentives when the public benefit is demonstrated. So that could be in the form of fee waivers, reimbursement, tax relief. It requires cost estimate and justification to be able to be utilized. So that's how it's worded in the existing development agreement policy. I think it's pretty high level because really those incentives to put costs and stuff in there, that would be too much because you don't know what's going to cost. You don't know what you're looking at. We don't know how big this thing is going to be. So just to say we're bringing you to the table, we're going to be asking for these kind of things, but we will also provide some kind of incentive structure if we see if it benefits the community. I think that's the big thing is it needs to benefit the community as a whole, not just your subdivision.
Well, there's a couple of things we should do. First off, like I said, the development agreements that are out there are public record. To the extent that there are 380 agreements associated with those, which there are not in every one of them, but some of them, the developers already have access to that, and they're going to see that, and they will do their own. This first thing they're going to look at, what did they get? The same thing is true of like Buc-ee's. If you can go look at Buc-ee's and see what they got at every one of their deals, because those have to be followed with the state. And Buc-ee's, when they go to a city can know what the last city gave them, and they can know if they're asking for more or less than what they asked for in the last year. So developers know the difference. Just be aware of that. Also be aware that at least on our current council, there is some kind of debate about whether this needs to be in there and how specific it needs to be. And it goes back to what I said earlier about not revealing your cards. I don't think it's one, cards are already revealed. They already have access to your existing developers. So that's already been exposed. And two, what I would recommend is just keep it very, very high level if you're going to keep it in there. And that would be, we are open to discussing bids, creating agreements on property sales tax. That's it. And maybe the establishment of terms. That's something we look at. But if you don't put any caveats on it, just say we're open to discussing those. Because then that gives you, if you're going to do one, first off, if you decide to do something like that, our recommendation to staff is always get everything you possibly can. Because at that point you're giving away, you literally are giving away tax dollars. Up to that point, it's all just kind of trying to get variances to certain requirements and that sort of thing. And those are cost implications for the developers to a certain extent. But when you start talking about actually getting money back, you need to get money.
Give me a couple of ideas of the kind of incentive you're talking about.
What?
The kind of incentive you're talking about.
But that's what I'm saying. So it's 380 agreements, which would be rebate. The other thing is understand these are always rebates. You're not going to take out of your general fund and write them a check to go build their whatever. It's always on the back end, so it's at the developer's risk. Meaning if it doesn't make, they don't get any money. If the value isn't there, they don't get any money. But it's a 380 agreement would reimburse them a portion of the property and sales taxes.
Oh.
And those portions are negotiated. It can be as little as 10% or as high as 100%. You can negotiate that, and generally they're time bound or dollar bound. In other words, we're going to give you this, we're going to reimburse this cost, and we'll do it over a 20-year period, and it'll end the sooner of when you get paid back or 20 years. So if you don't get paid back over 20 years, so sad, you don't get your money back. If you get paid back sooner, we're done. We're not paying you anymore. And you can, for an example of that, you can look at the Alsatian Register. It's a little.
So the items we discussed prior to this were things that the city would say we want. We want a combination of those things. The incentives are a tool for the city to kind of draw in the developer. It's more of what the developer is probably going to ask for. So it's almost I'm seeing it as almost a separate column, not necessarily what the city wants, although they may be okay with it, but it's more of what the developer's going to want.
That's correct.
So how does that, if we're looking at a document that is simple terms, a bullet point list of what the city wants, how does incentives roll into that? Or is it a
Let's
cliff
just
note
say
at
it
the
was a
bottom?
one pager. I would assume we put some language in there, and then this is what we're looking for: annexation, building materials, this, that, and the other. And at the bottom of that, if you provide some of these things, then we would be open to providing incentive structures or something where it's very simple. It doesn't have to get in depth or anything, and it just shows that we are willing to be flexible and work with them. So
The other thing is it communicates. I mean, it communicates to staff and policymakers are actually on board with that. And if you aren't, that's okay. Like if you and the council say we don't want to offer incentives, we don't even want to put that on the table, that's fine. It'll impact your discussion. It'll impact growth and discussion. But that's the whole that's the whole point. Y'all need to decide what you.
Would that be a deterrent to some developers, in your opinion?
Absolutely.
So then something like, as a bullet point, as you're saying, is put on there, have the developers a line item saying provide all incentives requested, and we'll bring it to the table in that sense?
Yeah, there's two ways to look at this. So it'll definitely disincentivize development.
Okay.
But it actually disincentivizes what hopefully the community recognizes as good development. Because the things that you're asking for are the things that they don't have to do. The state law doesn't allow you to require them to do. So you're trying to get them to do those things voluntarily. And there's give and take. If you don't offer incentives, if we're just trying to do incentives, then what will happen in the long run, generally speaking, not in every single case, is you'll just get developers to come in and they'll build what they want to build, what they're allowed to build,
right,
which is going to be a lower quality product, generally speaking. I speak generally because there are exceptions to everyone, right? But generally, they're going to just build what they can get away with building, or disannex for UTJ, or the things that they're allowed to do. So there's a reason you want it, in my opinion, there's a reason you want to include incentives as an offer. And I do agree, don't tell them what I wouldn't put
Don't show your card.
If you do this, we'll give you this.
Yes, right.
yeah, no.
Provide
I
it.
think that's silly. Leave that open for negotiation and make it as broad as possible. Just something like open the crack of the door. Because, like, for instance, every single one of them wanted to do a TERJ because they saw Alsatian notice in a TERJ. But I already knew from having conversations with our council that we aren't doing another TERJ. In part because TERJs give away, you understand the difference to PID. A PID is an assessment on those homeowners. A TERJ gives back tax money that would have come to the city otherwise, just like a 380 agreement. So we really don't like to do 380s or TERJs because you're giving back. You need to do something so extraordinary that the people are out there going, yeah, we love that they have this. And yes, we're willing to pay that developer our future revenues to have that thing. So they're very extraordinary. I would not.
I'd say like probably like a ball field. We really want a ball field.
Right.
Yeah.
If someone came in to build a sports complex, we might say, yeah, we'll do a 380 on that sports complex because that's a huge risk to them, but we get what we want, right? Great example.
So
I think
we,
it's an important tool.
so we want just some kind of broad sentence under
Like you
here,
said, open to suggestion.
open to suggestions.
Okay. I will.
Turn the porch light on.
Yeah.
Request what incentives they would like to see.
Okay. I will come up with language with that, as I will with all of these, and then we can, find. We could look at it, tweak them. Okay, we're on to category 2. Does anybody need a break? Y'all good to keep going? Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right.
And
Category
she
2.
didn't even give us candy, did she?
I'm sorry. I'm not Deborah. Standards. I'm not there.
Scott's got
Yeah.
a hideaway.
I'm so sorry.
Scott's got something to do.
You would have had like sandwiches and dessert.
Oh,
I'm
you
just
gotta
not that person.
go get it from the clerk. over
It
there.
isn't hidden. You have to know where to go
Oh.
back there.
Yeah, no, they're like bowls and bowls of candy. He'll go grab one. And
I hope
so.
he goes to Deborah's and brings the candy corn.
She might fight you over that one.
No, it bought for me.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
so we're moving on to category 2. So these are items that are permitted under local law or law for local regulation, but Castroville does not currently regulate. So we don't have anything about these things within our ordinances. So the reason why I pulled these out is because these things either, we could go a million different ways with this. We can either take it out completely of the development agreement and we don't see it even fit for our ordinances. We can include it in the development agreement. But I think if we're going to be including that in the development agreement, then we're also saying that we think that this should be on the list that council should be looking at when we're looking at our ordinances. Because why are you going to incentivize something in the development agreement, something that you know that you're not going to be regulating in your ordinances? So that's why these are pulled out a little bit. So we're going to go through each of these and we're going to see where we stand on them. And like I said, we're going to open up for discussion to see where everybody sits with all of these. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so connectivity. Why is it important? As we just spoke about earlier, the reason why this was put in here to begin with is because we did have those workshops, and this was a big thing on people's ticket. They really did think that these neighborhoods should be connected outside of just like one entrance in, one entrance out, that they should be connected to the neighborhoods next to them. We don't currently regulate that in our ordinances, but we might want to look into that because we have established that it could be important.
Well, I would say this also communicates, until you have a transportation plan because ideally this would be in your transportation plan.
Mhm.
And it would be evident from the transportation plan that that's what was needed. It could also appear in your subdivision, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if it's missing from the subdivision code, this would be, is this already in that category of things that if they want to
Yeah.
do it, that be done?
Yes. Yeah.
So we kind of need to know, is this something that's important to you all? Because if it is, ideally, yes, we can put it in the PA policy, but that really is just a temporary placeholder until you update it.
When you're talking connectivity, how much does, and we think about Highway 90 and what's going to be built and what's their connectivity, how much does the state have to say about connectivity?
So when it comes to Highway 90, TxDOT is completely in control of Highway 90. So we cannot force connectivity on Highway 90. But what we can do, like with Alsatian Oaks, at one point all they had was like just the neighborhoods that you see that have one entrance in, one entrance out. Well, we said, hey, you're gonna have Flat Creek to the east of you. Yeah, the east of you. You're gonna have some connectivity between those two neighborhoods outside of just those major thoroughfares. So just like some local street connectivity, and that's what we're talking about. We cannot regulate connectivity on off of a TxDOT right of way.
It's also commercial though, it extends beyond like,
Yeah.
in the commercial developments, you would think that would go without saying, but shared parking, so some developers really don't like to do shared parking.
Mhm.
Because maybe they have a certain store that doesn't want to do shared parking, but you know, they can, sometimes you're actually giving the developer an out with their tenants by requiring it, because otherwise their tenant's gonna tell them what they want and what they don't want. But if you have a requirement or a code, then it kind of gives them an out to say, I'm sorry, tenant,
Yeah.
X, this is what the city requires, because it's not uncommon. But it goes beyond that, and it's also
Yeah.
shared parking.
Yeah, and just connectivity in between commercial businesses. Like you go out here on Highway 90 and you can't get from Bush's over to Pizza Hut, over to Sonic. You have to go out onto Highway 90. Yeah. So like I said, we need to figure out if this is important and then how we need to move forward with this. So what's in the development agreement policy currently? So for residential is that grid block structure, which we spoke about earlier, where it's a 30 by 30 block. So saying that it's smaller block sizes, which forces connectivity because you're going to have a lot of ways around you.
It's one way.
It is one way to force it. Yeah. And then connectivity to adjacent neighborhoods, same thing. It's just like how we did with Alsatian Oaks and Flat Creek, is that we required them to make some connectivities within their actual residential neighborhoods. Cul-de-sac limitations. I know a lot of people do like cul-de-sacs in these bigger neighborhoods, but that really limits, like when everything just comes to an end, that limits the connectivity within that neighborhood to adjacent properties, all of those things. And then also for connectivity via walking, those pedestrian block breaks at the 690 foot mark. And that's just saying that at 600, if there's a 690 foot block, that there's going to be a pedestrian walk break, so they can go from one side of the neighborhood, the block, to the other side without having to go around.
The cul-de-sac thing is the one that's really big for me. I just irritates the crap out of me because you have developers that, I've had specific conversations with some developers say, well, I have to have cul-de-sac because that's where people really like the cul-de-sac, like required neighborhood. I think that's BS. There's a lot of other ways to do that. You can do a single loaded road, and you can put it up against the trail feature or something else that gives that same level of quietness. And two, you can also do the way you design those neighborhoods. You could do that road on the back end that's not got houses loaded on it, like a single family or a single sided road, and it will have the same outcome of quietness. But going back to your experience with like policing, it is very, very difficult to ensure the safety of the residents. We can't effectively drive down roads easily. Like, it's really easy to be in a cop car and surveil a community by driving block by block. But every freaking one of those is a cul-de-sac. It's just, it becomes very inefficient.
Yeah. And so how can this be regulated? Like we said
It
earlier.
does make it harder for burglars to get out, though.
That is
Yeah,
true.
well, except that if they go running from a cul-de-sac into,
Yeah,
which is
they'll
what they
jump.
usually do.
They jump a fence and go to the other neighborhood. Now you got to go all the way
That's
out.
right.
Yeah.
That's my point. Usually they're going to go down to that cul-de-sac and
Yeah.
find a way out through the cul-de-sac where you can't go.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, all the kids will know where to go.
And then when we had those conversations, this was the biggest one for the school district. They were like, everybody thinks that like it's that we like those big wide roads and that all the student, and they said no, like we prefer if it's connected where we can, if there's something blocking that roadway, or if there's something happening, we can go to the next street over, and we have an easier way to turn around these tight corners than we do going into those one-way, these subdivisions where they're trying to, now you have to make the cul-de-sacs really big because they have to have this big turn radius, and now you have all this pavement and asphalt. They're like, that doesn't really help us. It actually is better downtown, even though there's tight streets, because we can go multiple different ways we need to. So that was one. I was a little surprised because I thought they liked those big circles, but no, they said that's actually not one of their favorite things. So
Makes sense.
Well, I think it's something that's important for the overall development of the city to get everything connected. It could be something as simple as mandating a requirement to connect to existing street stubs if the adjacent property is developed, or to stub to undeveloped property if that's what's next to you,
Yeah.
and create that connection. I don't know that, I don't feel like we need to mandate how often or anything like that with this document.
Mhm.
Something to consider that would be site specific.
yeah, I think so. Well,
The way y'all are rolling this out, where I think about it, we're staying kind of at that high level, it seems like, across the board.
Yeah.
So I think maybe one way to think about the policy document is that it's a value statement.
Mhm.
We value, like we were saying before, we value fiscal stewardship. We're new growth, new growth economy. We value connectivity where, you know, people are able to whatever, however we word that. I think
Yeah.
That's a good point, because if it could kind of coach them and what we want and how to get creative and make the pitch, then we may see it.
without providing much regulation.
Yeah.
I think that's where the other policy went wrong, was just too much.
Detailed, too
to
detailed.
detail. And I think that's
When you
great.
drill it down, that's what you're stuck with.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, like every property is going to be different. You know, if there's something already developed to the right of you and it's completely blocked off, just like how that one that's right behind Napa, they couldn't do any connectivity to the north because that's already developed. So we can't require connectivity to the north or every so many blocks because they can't provide that to us. So we're already setting ourselves up for failure. So
690 portion would also give an option to stub it out or make it wide enough for future.
Mhm.
So is that 690? Is that just for walkway
that's just
or
our
right
walkway.
of way wide enough for a possible street?
No, it's just a walkway.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a walkability thing.
So I think from a policy perspective, we're saying that we're okay with the generalized, broad, higher level, higher value statement.
Mhm.
But as far as the action of connectivity, should we discuss whether or not it needs to be added to the subdivision ordinances? Because it's at some point it's going to have to be discussed, right?
Yeah.
So would
I
y'all's
mean-
recommendation would be to potentially go through the process to add these items to the subdivision
I think
ordinances?
we're gonna go through a CZO review.
Okay.
And it'd be too much to try and tackle tonight.
Right.
But what we are looking for is, if this is some, that's kind of why she broke it out this way, and I really appreciate you. But, we just looking kind of heading on it. If this is something you want in the DA policy, would you also want us to consider looking at CZO ago. So that way, whenever committee gets involved, when we get that point, we're gonna show them the DA policy
Right.
we developed, and we're gonna talk about tenants in it, and say that basically when this went to P&Z, this is one of those areas that they felt the CCO needed to be updated. They didn't give parameters on
Right.
how, but we need to talk about connectivity in the CCO. And
Okay.
walkability.
Yeah.
I think this went too far.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Jim would.
Yeah.
For the
You don't
reasons
want
you-
330-foot blocks? Okay, so we'll move on to, I got a good consensus on that. Okay, underground utilities, why is this important? I mean, first of all, just the aesthetics of it. It doesn't always look great when there's a CPS pole off of every front lot. Safety and reliability, the more it's open to weather and external, like car crashes and all those things. How many times have we been out of power because somebody hit a pole down the street? So it keeps it underground. So it's a safety and a reliability thing. And this is what we've also been asking. All of these things we've asked for in current development agreements, but this is one that we've pushed pretty hard because it's just, I think that's,
Generally, developers want to, it's an open line of sight.
yeah.
It's something I was talking to my wife about when we were traveling. We went up to DFW for some family events this weekend. And we were driving through town anyway, driving through this community, and I asked my family, I said, y'all notice anything that's missing? Because again, I'm a city manager, I can't get out. And they're like, no. I'm like, you see the electric lines? And even their main thoroughfares, everything was underground. It wasn't until you literally got to the edge of the city where the big transmission lines came in, but from that point on, everything was underground. Their whole system was underground. And you wouldn't think it made that big a difference, but it was gorgeous. Like the community was gorgeous because you just take it for granted. Electric lines are ugly. You don't
Roanoke's like that.
you don't know how ugly they are. What's that?
Roanoke is like that.
Yeah, there are different places. Roanoke. Yeah.
The
So
newer portions, they're still existing.
we aren't requiring that at this stage. We still have a lot of our systems above ground. It's too expensive for us to do it.
But moving forward, yeah. And so that, of course, would also be like fiber optic too, because everybody's going to fiber. I really do think this is where we need to also update our ordinances, because we should be mandating this where they have to put fiber optic in, because if
No
not,
more
then
options.
Huh?
Fiber's the only way to go.
exactly. Well, because you
AT&T
see what
doesn't
happens
comfort.
down here is when they're doing those fiber lines, they hit every other line besides, yeah.
It's called a duct bank.
Yeah.
It's not that they put fiber in. They would put in. We would require them to create a duct bank, and the duct bank would facilitate installation of fiber or other things within it without risking your water and your sewer lines and other problems.
Joint trench, please.
Okay, so
That's a hard guess for me.
Yeah.
hard yes.
Give it a thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think we can make a note about that.
Okay. Good.
Because I
Okay. Let's see.
And
So
we're also gonna talk about it going into the subdivision.
yeah. So everything that y'all are telling me, thumbs up. I just gonna put a note like, okay, these are things that whenever city council, and I think it's David Mers and Houston Marchman that are tackling what y'all need to be looking at when it comes to the CZO and subdivision and how we're going to be updating that as we move forward. These are things that I'm going to bring to their attention, just like I did the sign ordinance and those kinds of things. So they said that they did, and I think David said he wanted to do talk to council about what they talked about. Yeah. Okay. Neighborhood services. Why is this important? It's the same thing. It just promotes walkability, strengthens community character, and we'll kind of get into what this is. So it's really strict within the development agreement policy. It says each residential lot should be within 2,500 feet of retail, food, or service uses. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that to have a complete community, you do want those services available. You want a little bit of commercial, you want a church, you want schools, but it's really hard to show what that looks like unless you know where your thoroughfares are going to be located. So I think this is one of those things where it's probably a good, overall, we like to see neighborhood services, so people don't have to get in their car every time they want a coffee. Maybe there's one on the corner. Maybe there's a little local grocer like we have here. But to get into this level of detail, I don't know if that's necessary for the development
So
agreement
how would you
policy.
state that as a value statement?
Mm.
Will this be like a corner store in the middle of the subdivision type thing?
It could be. I mean, there's
Okay.
that's yeah. Like Alsatian Notes, for
It
example,
could also be a barber or a daycare
or
just something that, or a donut shop, it's something that you don't have to drive to 90 for, but that most families need.
Utilize.
So then a commercial zone for potential businesses.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the way,
Gotcha.
the value statement I'm thinking of is like, we encourage mixed use.
Yeah, I was gonna say this from a developer's perspective. This will encourage mixed use
Yes.
development, and then they'll find the tenants once
Yeah.
it's done.
Well, and the tenants in the spaces, like they have, when they're doing your land planning, what we're saying is we would like to see mixed use, or we would encourage mixed use.
we encourage mixed.
Neighborhood service is a little bit abstract for a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
Mixed use isn't. The issue when you talk about mixed use is, unfortunately,
Can't regulate what's going to go in there.
what's that?
You can't regulate what's going to go in
Well, that's the case in a lot of it, but mixed use sometimes also includes high density family apartment complexes. That's what some people associate with mixed use.
Mhm.
So that's where having the neighborhood services does clarify that we're talking about commercial.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe when I say mixed use commercial and retail applications,
Yeah.
something like that.
Something like that.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just tell us if we're all
Thumbs up.
phased. Okay.
Brian, I want you to tell me where the little grocery store is I can walk to.
There's all over.
From her house, that's the issue. So if you go south of 90, you can
Jukes.
walk,
Dollar
to
General.
Dollar
Tree?
General.
Dollar Tree, yeah.
That
You can
is
walk to
the
Dollar Tree, and you
grocery.
can go to a pharmacy.
That isn't
You
a
can go to-
grocery.
We're not talking about quality. We're just talking about proximity.
You can
No,
go
get
to
a box of macaroni.
Community Center.
The only grocery store closed. Shop's
It's the
closed,
grocery.
right?
This doesn't say
Shop's closed.
That's right.
This says neighborhood services. Dollar Tree offers neighborhood services.
Okay.
It's not a grocery store, although it has some.
There was one right where Dollar
I
Tree
know.
is.
I know why you're saying that. But there are restaurants within walkability. I mean,
Oh,
you have
yeah.
a lot of things
I
here on
have-
the south
I
side.
do. If you can get across Highway 90.
No, I
Hey,
mean,
there's the
front-
beverages
Well,
are in there, Priscilla. It's
Oh, the
okay.
beverage
Yeah.
store, okay.
I actually said, I'm glad you said that. I thought.
There are plenty of options.
There's a lot of
There's
options.
plenty of
right?
places.
I just have to, never mind.
You just gotta get out for it, Priscilla. You gotta
Oh,
get out.
really?
Get on your riding lawnmower and make this all out.
You need to get you a bicycle.
It has flat tires, so.
Okay,
right.
so the
Dark
next thing
skies.
is Dark Skies Lighting. This has been something that has been really been pushed on, I don't want to say on staff, but it's been pushed by previous councils.
Well, we actually did adopt, so council,
Yeah.
was it this council?
No, it was the last
Yes,
one.
when Devin was here, because Devin, I think, is the one who brought it up.
Devin brought it up, but we didn't actually get the, because the process is lengthy.
Yeah.
We just adopted the resolution that lays out. I can't remember if we actually adopted the ordinance.
Well, you have to adopt the resolution, and then you get put on a list. Basically, they see, I think it's like a 7-year process, a 4-year, 7-year process to actually be designated as a dark skies community. And it's like you adopt the resolution saying that you want your community to be dark skies, and then you slowly adopt things that implement those dark
You actually
skies.
have to put it in your code.
Yeah.
So if we're serious about dark skies and you want to be dark skies designated, it has to be, they actually give you the language that needs to be in your zone.
Yeah.
I think it usually requires, if you have any kind of new retrofits or something, it's gotta.
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah, so that would be, and that's like for the whole community, you know, that would even be for like downtown. So if there's somebody that wants to replace their light that shines off, like we would have to say, no, sorry, you're going to have to replace it with something that's downward facing. It's under all these lumens and
And
things like
most
that.
of your dark, honestly, most of your lighting in Cashville proper is dark sky.
Yeah.
Most of it is, just because it is. It's not because somebody made it that way.
Yeah. And then the same thing with signage, like big things with signage is that it has to be turned off after a certain time at night, things like that. There's different things you have to do for commercial signage that say, of course, they always rather have the spotlights than the big illuminated signs, but the illuminated signs are not prohibited. It's just that they have to be on timer basis. They can't be over a certain lumens at night, things like that. So,
How does TxDOT regulate dark skies?
They don't.
They don't at all.
but everything
It's
along.
too big an issue for the state to take
Is
on.
it?
Yeah.
It's too
That's
big.
why they do allow the municipalities to do so, and that's why. So everything within our little corridor here. I know this is a tech stop corridor, but those are all on commercial properties that we do zone and that we can put regulations on. So we're good for having that one in. I
Yeah.
think it's been a
Yes.
staple of the community so far.
I
Yeah.
will say that the biggest, most difficult conversation I had was with the car dealer. Ultimately, they didn't do a development agreement, they didn't come to something.
Yeah.
But this was a real big issue for them because you don't really think about it, but their lights, they have, all of their cars have windshields and glass all over them and shiny metal. And so it's very difficult for them to meet the requirements of our staff.
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges.
But putting it in here, we're not mandating it. We're
No,
just saying.
We're just looking for your interest. If you're
Yeah.
interested, we're also making you trying to be candid and tell you what's coming,
Yeah.
so that you can go, we didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you know.
Okay, so moving on, upgraded street signage. So this is, so for Alsatian Oaks and Flat, I think all of them that have come on board, we've all required of them to put upgrade street signage. And what that means, it's not just the metal pole, aluminum pole that goes in the ground with the stop sign on it. It's the actual, like the fluted with the nice base at the bottom that has a little scroll at the top and their little emblem for what their subdivision name is, and the nice, that was also another big thing for the previous city council. We haven't had an instance where we've had to bring that to our current council to see what their feelings are on it. But I'd love to hear what y'all think, if it brings value to the
I've heard
community.
any negative comments about it.
Yeah, people really like those signs. I know the people in the neighborhood. I've talked to a couple of them that actually live in Alsatian Oaks, and they love the decorated signs. It does bring value to the community. It looks way different.
Let me tell you two things. Two things you need to know. One, a couple of implications. One, with Alsatian Oaks, this wasn't in their development agreement. So when council indicated they wanted that, I had to go work a deal with Alsatian Oaks to pay for part of that cost. So we ended up having to shell out some money to pay for those signs. Flat Creek, it's in their development agreement. They have to pay for all the signs until one of them gets hit.
Yeah,
If someone runs over a sign, we actually have to pay to replace it. But the signs aren't, they're more expensive than a steel pole. Most get good. They're not terribly expensive. To replace one at a time. If you're putting them all in all at once, it's expensive. For the developer.
I like the look of the signs, but I also think if this is a public street and a sign that the city has to replace, it would be nice to standardize a custom look so that the city isn't replacing 50 different sign standards.
Well, I think that, I think the goal was to be able to go backwards into the old part of town and replace our signs. I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying. The thing is, you'll run into some developers that just want their own look.
Mhm.
I wonder if that's something we need to consider making a part of the HOA. If they're gonna have an HOA, that the HOA has to.
Have you heard, are there gonna be HOAs out there?
Almost, if they have PIDs, they have HOAs. So all of these are gonna have PIDs, almost all of them probably have HOAs.
As an example, like Bear County doing developments in the ETJ San Antonio, developers will want to sometimes upgrade handrail next to drains and stuff and do something decorative over box culverts, whatever. There's a maintenance agreement that is done that basically states that the county is not, or whoever is not responsible for replacing it beyond accepted standards. And then so anything above and beyond that is on the developer. So that could be, to your point, something that's in the
Or on
development
the
agreement,
HOA.
or the HOA, yeah.
Yeah, so if you like the upgraded signs, then what I'm hearing is either look at a standard, so that there's a standard across the board, or build it into the agreement that the HOA pays for those replacement of those signs. Or pays for the cost difference between the standard sign. I would just say,
So that's between the developer and the HOA then? Or
What's
that would be between, well, the developer
that'd
is
be
not
between
like
the
the
city.
city and the HOA.
The city
Yeah,
would put
and
it
the
in the
developer.
development agreement, and the developer would have to make sure that it's in the terms of
And that's probably in the weeds and the details. I don't know that the
Right.
development
The real question
policy
is, do you
is
like
that,
it?
but yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's a lead.
Got it. Okay. Landscaping standards. This is just another one, especially with the community character, aesthetics. comfort. It's always better to walk on a sidewalk that has some street trees, some shade underneath, especially in this Texas heat. We do not have a tree preservation or a tree ordinance for the city. That one got repealed, I think, in 2019, somewhere, maybe 2020. Yeah. And so we don't have any of those landscaping standards right now within. So this is another one that we do talk to the developers about, saying, hey, if you're going to have like these long streets, you need to provide street trees. And on here it says every 45 feet on center. The landscaping must be native and drought tolerant plants to make sure that we're not just putting in things where we know it's going to die the second it hits 102 degrees outside. And then, of course, screening should use natural buffers instead of walls and fences to try to keep it, to keep it looking natural outside. And it's not just a whole bunch of fences and walls. It has some landscaping around it.
There's actually been a lot of study on value transfer.
Yeah.
So if you take a 7-Eleven and you put it on the edge of a community and you put a wall all the way around it, like a lot of people do, a privacy wall, the value of that 7-Eleven doesn't transfer into the value into that community behind it. It actually, and it encourages some bad uses because people need to hide back there and do other things. Whereas if you were to take the exact same layout and you put a berm with some trees and bushes where it's not really walkable to get from point A to point B, and it creates the vegetative block that the wall used to provide, now all of a sudden the value of that 7-Eleven gets transferred into the value of the community. That their value, their home values, the values of the homes and the values of the business are connected in a way that it's hard to study. It's fascinating.
I'm sure there's a TED Talk on it somewhere. I said, I'm sure there's a TED Talk on
Yeah,
it somewhere.
I remember it was, this was, the guy that taught me this was a guy with Architects. He's a professor. Dallas. He took design in Clybourne Park.
On this particular topic, I would probably lean more towards going back to, the value-added statement instead of a specific, like every 45 feet on center, that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, because when you start saying, putting drilling it down that far, that,
So we.
but I mean, I like the idea, yes.
So Brian, how would you state that as a value statement?
I would probably say we encourage the use of native landscaping throughout the neighborhood to enhance its viability and its value. Something to that.
It's very good.
Yeah, very good.
Chat GPT right there.
My journalism major sometimes comes through.
I'll let you write the value statements for all of these.
There you go.
What did you go out as for PD?
Oh, I was just a patrolman.
Yeah, so my question is, I didn't know that, but did your sergeant like your reports?
He did the
Because
first.
patrol can write
I never got him kicked back. Let's put
That's good.
So that's a good
But
thing.
I kicked his minutes back.
Yeah, but that's just because I didn't have the number.
You didn't have. You didn't have.
I didn't have numbered
all
as for the
content
agenda.
was great,
You
but
didn't need to throw him under the bus. He was doing just
actually,
Oh, yes, he
He's
did.
my neighbor. I can't. But yeah, they weren't. But his content was excellent. But
Yeah, like I said.
and actually, it was Deborah that threw him under the bus. 'Cause I
Oh,
sent
there
it
you
to
go. Let's put it on
Deborah.
Deborah. She's not here.
I know, she can't even defend herself.
I sent it to Deborah. Deborah said she kind of prefers it in format.
A journalism major in college,
He
so.
had to go back.
And a news director.
I
No,
did. No, I've had to.
yeah, my news director career lasted 2 years, so.
All right, trails.
Okay.
Next.
So
I'm just
we're
gonna call-
keeping native landscaping. These minutes are going to be simple because you're going to come back with us,
Yeah.
right? I'm just
Speaking of
It's on video.
what?
minutes.
It's on
Oh.
video.
Yeah.
So why are trails important? It's kind of along the same vein as landscaping. It's just it's not landscaping. It just provides walkability. A lot of people like those, and I feel like if in those neighborhoods that you do see, like over off of Trenco and the ones that are the gated ones, that is one thing that the people really do like are the trails. I went to Round Walk the other day for a conference, and I had to go through. It was like a community, and it had some commercial, had a little bit like apartments, some condos for the elderly, but it had all these trails that ran through it. And I mean, the amount of people that were on those trails that 7, 8 o'clock in the morning was just, I was like, wow, this is great. And I think people really do value
Were they
things like that.
sidewalks or the trails?
It was a mixture. There was some sidewalks, and then once you got down, you could tell it was like a floodplain kind of situation. And once you got into the floodplain, it was more like the crushed granite.
Yeah, a lot of them are
Yeah.
just asphalted sometimes.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I want to distinguish between sidewalks and trails.
Yeah, no, there was some sidewalks, but there was trails along the drainage area that you could see all the way down. So
So one good thing was we encourage trails and green space, unusable green space.
yeah, encourage trail. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
See, encourage trails.
Yeah. I think that's a good one to have in there.
San Antonio moved into their, trying to ring the city with green space.
They spent in North Texas. They spent a lot of money creating. I can't remember what it's called. It's this trail that is hundreds of miles long. It
Yeah.
spans through all these different communities.
They're,
Cool.
San Antonio, of course, they have the river trail that goes from north to south.
'Cause, like,
They started linking these parks
Yeah.
all the way around
On
the
the
cities.
north
Like-
side, they've really got some tremendous ones that even go over main highways.
Leon Creek
On the
from
north side.
De Zavala all the way to Babcock, they use
Yeah.
Leon Creek itself as
Yeah.
a riverbed
Exactly.
as
Yeah.
trails, so they're utilizing all space.
Because it certainly does promote, like you said, if people are out and they're walking, they're going to say hello to each other. It's going to promote communities.
So I hear trails positive, and we have Marcus's recommendation.
Yes, and I got that written down. Are y'all good
Good.
with that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Like it.
great. Awesome. Okay, and so now we're going to get into category 3, and I just put this as UDO elements. So as I was going through this, I really did think, because we always keep saying that we tied this, we made this development agreement and stopgap with the UDO, but when I went through it, these were the only things that I found that actually were specific to the UDO. Everything else we either did not regulate or the things that we could not regulate. So there's little things here and there that I didn't want to get street sections, like stuff like that I feel like we already established that we would need to be a little higher level than that. But the actual UDO elements, these are the only 3 things that I found, which was crazy because people keep saying we were tying it back. This is a stopgap. This is all of these things. But we actually didn't have that much in the development agreement policy itself. And so the first thing is the block lengths, the 330 foot by 330 foot block size requirements. I think we've already been established that we are not trying to get into that level of detail in the development agreement, and that we do not need to put that in this development agreement policy.
The thing I would ask you on this one,
Mhm.
looking for inclusion in like a CZO, is that last bullet point, which is grid street layout with limited cul-de-sacs. I think based on our earlier conversation, that I saw general agreement that we aren't going to say you can't have any cul-de-sacs,
Right.
but that encouraging gridded development is a better transportation plan. It's a more efficient way of getting around policing,
Yeah.
for the schools, for the other things we stated. So I would suggest that maybe it doesn't belong to DA, because we've already covered it, but when we get to a CZO, that's something we don't like. So,
So
but just that third bullet.
And I will point out on the 2 town halls that I went with UDO, there was a lot of people for the grid lock or the grid style
yeah,
blockage. I mean, overwhelmingly, I was shocked. That's what I want, but I was surprised how many people were around that table talking yes, 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 yes.
yeah,
So just to put it out there for y'all.
Heard it here first.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just because you think about it, like most people, they live in the core of Cashville. It works for y'all. It's it can be accomplished. You know what I mean? So it is something you can code in and can be accomplished. It just does put a lot of burden on the developers because that's typically not what they're looking for.
To some point, I guess maybe contrary to that, say they like the grid approach because it's squared and efficient with lot layouts.
Mhm.
It would come down to the intensity of the block size that
Yes.
would get the friction between developers and code, I think.
That's why I'm saying I think take those first two bullets out.
And just like grid street layouts
Mhm.
with limited cul-de-sacs. Okay.
Yeah, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Just
So
first two
you're-
bullets out. If you leave the third one, you're
Yeah,
saying
I think you're
one
going to
grid-
see that in a lot of natural layouts anyways.
Can I ask for a definition? Because I saw the term intensity in reference to development. What does that actually mean? I tried to think through
It
it.
depends on the application. Depends on what you're talking about. So with the way that Jim just used it, he's talking about how much infrastructure has to go in, the intensity of infrastructure. If
Okay.
you put every 330 feet, you're going to have a road going in with sidewalks and curbs and underground
Right.
drainage. And,
Okay, so
like, that's an intense amount of cost and infrastructure for that developer to take on. Whereas if you say that a normal block, in current development's more like 1,600 feet.
I mean, on average, they're right under 1,000. 1,200 is the max, but yeah.
So much.
you got the straight
it's
runs, you don't have to worry about
literally
corners.
Yeah.
So you're increasing the intensity of development
Okay.
by 3x if you require every 330 feet.
Gotcha. Okay. I wasn't sure what that, when you said intensity, if it was the number of people or the number of cars or,
But I mean, intensity could be linked to like the number of like the intensity of the traffic, the intensity. It can be
It's just-
linked to
it
that.
depends
It's
on
just
the
like, yeah, it
context.
just depends on how you're
yeah, that's
using
what
it. Yeah.
I've seen it used in several different places, and I just never could pin it down like what they were actually referring to, like the number of houses on a lot,
Yeah.
number of structures on a lot, that kind of thing.
Like,
I guess it could be that.
yeah, just like it can be like high intensity commercial, which means that it allows for a lot of land use applications. It could be a multiple of things. You could have a drive through there that has cars constantly going through it, or low intensity, which is like an office building that only 3 people are parking at one time throughout the day.
Oh.
So it can be used in a multiple
Yeah.
different ways.
Thank you for the education. I needed.
Okay, so
All right.
the next thing that specifically was pointed out in the development agreement is housing diversity, and this is something that is definitely was more towards the UDO. We don't speak about any kind of housing diversity in our existing ordinances. I can tell you that in the master plans, like the ones from 2011, 2016, they do talk about housing diversity, saying we need to find places for it because not everybody can afford to live on a 12,000 square foot lot or a large big house, and some people may want a very smaller garden home. An elderly person maybe doesn't need a yard, but they would appreciate a big park open space. I think it's important for a community, but like I said, these are things that those were written out in the UDO, but we don't have those currently in our ordinances. And so,
Well, on that third bullet, so there's a couple things. The third bullet on the repetitive facades, that's in all your development.
Yeah.
And that's something that behind the scenes council has indicated. We think this is important. We don't want cookie cutter, same house types. We won't tell them what they have to put, but we want different types.
Diversity.
And it's not, frankly, I think the language in the ones we have are not as diverse as they probably should. We don't require, you can still end up in a free cookie cutter situation.
So you would like take out the middle one and maybe just talk about?
No, I'm just mentioning that one's in all your development agreements, so y'all what y'all want to do. I think there is certainly in those same meetings, I wouldn't go and say it's a majority, but I heard on multiple times, multiple occasions, different people, and David Burge is on council now, and we'll definitely hear him say this, that we need housing for all times. And I heard that repeated a bunch of times. But the issue is, to be honest point, that's not in your current code. There's nothing that talks about that. Now, the state is working. I'll be honest, if we do nothing, I don't think you're going to have to wait too long. The state, every legislative session for the last 2 sessions, I say everyone, the last 2 sessions, maybe the last 3, there has been legislation to force cities to encourage and allow affordable housing. Affordable housing is a really big deal for Texas right now. And so they're trying to figure out how to do it. Unfortunately, I think as a general law city especially, we're probably going to be told about what that looks like in the near future, and it probably won't look like the way we want it.
I think that was also brought up in the master plans earlier because evidently we're missing out on grants, not having enough affordable housing in the area.
No.
That's
No.
something.
Okay, there's 2 things. Affordable housing, I don't know we're missing on grants for not having affordable housing. The fact is, if you
Enough
don't have
of.
affordable housing, there's grants out there to help you get it.
Gotcha.
What we're missing out on grants is on socioeconomic status.
Gotcha.
Believe it or not, we're the wealthiest community in Medina County. And that doesn't help us when we're going after grants. And if we were to do a CDBG project, one of the things that I really find delightful about Castro, genuinely I think is neat, is that you don't have segregation of poor versus wealthy or well off. It just doesn't exist here. And I don't think people from here appreciate how unique that is. Even small cities, in most of the communities I've served, they've been what's called redlining, where generally it's on race lines. Black people lived over here, and everybody else lived over here. That has happened in a lot of communities. Y'all never really dealt with that. I think there was a black community for a long time ago, not just the airport, but there's still, in most communities, it's where the railroad tracks are, where there's this impoverished area. You guys don't have that. And that's really cool. Even Hondo has that. Most cities have something like that. Coordinated, where they all have it. It's pretty cool. But it makes it really hard to get grants, because you have to have a concentration of socioeconomic depressed status to get a grant. And we can do it. When we did our last CG, we did a 2-block area.
Is it gonna get
We found
worse?
a 2-block area where we could do a water line. And we got the water line paid for. Which is great.
But that's all they
So
do.
that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Is it gonna get worse because of what's getting built out here? Because,
That's just raising everything.
I mean, that'll just be.
Worse in the sense that we're gonna, if you look at what our standards have been and what we're attracting, I believe that you're gonna continue to be the wealthiest community.
That's what I was asking, that's not gonna help.
And even this,
Getting
even
the
affordable
grants.
housing doesn't guarantee socioeconomic status. And I would argue that there's ways to go about doing affordable housing that would still meet some of the goals and ambitions that the prior city council wanted to achieve, which is high value places. What that means is smaller lot, smaller footprint. So think of a person living, I know this would argue that an elderly person living on their own, who doesn't need 4 bedrooms and whatever. They just need a small efficiency space, but they still want something nice. They don't want to live, they want to live in a nice area. So those things generally you're going to still spend $200, $250 per square foot, but because you're only buying 900 square foot home and it meets all your needs, that is considered affordable, right?
Right.
Now, the concern you can run into is when you have those types of houses, you have someone who needs more space, that can only afford that space, and they're moving in with 3 generations
10
into a
cars.
single bedroom
Yeah.
because
Across
maybe they're
from
from a place where that's normal.
Across from
India,
where?
India, Egypt, places like that.
All those
I guess my question comes up is how do we reconcile that number 2, housing diversity, after the many meetings and many people that showed up after the Kemp, submission and what he wanted to try and do. Now, granted, some were pushing from the historical standpoint. Others were saying, no, that's going to be too many people in my neighborhood. I know it was sold off as, well, this is going to be for elderly people. I'm just going to
His
rent
was
the
his
whole.
intensity. I'm going to say this again. I like Josh Kemp. I think he was treated very, very poorly. To the
Well,
point of
I mean,
but he was told when he presented that to staff, "Hey, buddy, I don't think that your public's going to go for this." He was so in love with his own idea. He said, "No, I convinced people. All right, well, what we would like you to do and recommend is you go beyond the 200 feet required. Go to every block that touches that block and talk to every person on that block." That's what we suggested he do. Now, I don't know if he did it or not. You can't require it, but we asked him to do it. But his issue really was he was putting 14 units.
Yeah.
On what was traditionally 2 house space, or
It would be-
this
we've
doesn't
been-
do that. This language here simply says for every 5 market rate houses, you're going to have 1 that's going to be an affordable house. And how they accomplish that is there's a lot of different ways to go about accomplishing that, right? And most of that can be done by simply saying that's going to be a small lot.
Oh, I don't disagree with what you just said. I'm just saying that the public opinion over housing diversity came up during that particular instance, and we're talking, 7 months ago, maybe?
Concentrate, but the thing was it was a concentration of that.
Yeah.
This isn't concentrated.
Yeah.
Unless you do, that depends how you go about it. Again, if you say you have to have 1 for every 5, okay, well, I'm going to build 600 houses, 500 of them are going to be normal homes, and they're all going to be over here, and then I have 100 they're gonna be over here. So we need to probably think, that goes back into CCO and land use planning. That's how you avoid that though.
And then-
You say, we're not
But
gonna
is there
have
some way
concentration.
we can say,
But
you
that's how-
don't separate them from the others?
But then that's how you also come up with typically with those smaller lots, that means that you're going to require more open space. So instead of having them all spread out amongst this whole sheet of paper, you have them like over here, but then all of this has to be open space, or there needs to be a commercial aspect over here, or there needs to be a public civic space over here. So instead of just having just all of this be residential, you have this little corner up here be residential, and then the rest of it has to be open space. And that's how you also,
But what keeps,
Building
if
value.
the
Building value.
smaller houses are there, what keeps it from getting, I don't know how to word this.
Trashy.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
Well, that's exactly it.
It's
Because it always comes down to the argument of, why is it in my backyard?
yeah, well,
Because
it comes down to
We saw that
nuisance.
I
Yeah.
keep reflecting back to San Antonio and the experience that I had
Uh-huh.
just going around and making calls to these types of housing developments and neighborhoods where they wanted to have housing diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, sitting on this board and having to think forward, okay, what are we going to put these new incoming neighbors, what are we going to subject them to by allowing that?
Yeah.
And
Again, I think that goes back to, the short answer is, it goes to land use planning and how you plan your land use. The longer answer is all the details. Like I said, the same way that, if you go back to the slide that shows the housing types, the diversity of housing types, remember? Not housing, but the facades.
Which one?
There's a language about facades and how many facades you have to have.
Oh, yeah. I know what
I
you're
just don't remember what it was.
Oh.
But that it would be similar language to that. So in other words, in a community, you can't have the same facade for all cookie cutter. You would do something similar in your land use planning or in your lot planning. That's when I say land use, I'm talking about sizes of lots. And you simply say that if you're going to accomplish having those affordable houses in, you can't have a row of affordable houses. You can have this size, one of these size lots for every 4 or 5 of these others, and they can't be next to each other, or they can't be within 4 units of the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's a way to word that.
Yeah.
but
I see
that's
how you
the
could do it.
utility.
I'm just thinking of it from the standpoint of a developer. I'm like, okay, they want me to put 1 for every 5. How am I going to sell the other 2 on either side of that house? And that's how they're going to look at it.
Yeah, but
So, I mean, if you're saying that sooner or later the state's going to come in and say, oh, you're going to have to do this anyway.
well, it's not going to look the way you want it to. The problem is when the state does this, they're going to say you can't have minimum lot sizes.
Yeah.
That's one of the bills that was proposed. No minimum lot size period. So that would be no
I-
minimum lot size.
Well, I mean,
I
get it.
agree
If we're
with-
going to have to do it, we're going to have to do it. But
I agree with Brian on that point, and just thinking through the developers. I mean, just like your example of the value spread add through berms from a commercial to residential adjacent to it, I think when you do one of these lots, it impacts the value of the lots around it.
Well, I'm just saying, you
You
can
know,
see
so-
that now. Though. Go drive through a normal subdivision. You'll see a single family house, 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and next door is a 2-story, 3,500 square foot home. And then next door to that, maybe it's a 2,200 square foot home. Like they mix in these smaller footprints. It's just, we're talking about scale.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess it'd be the magnitude of the requirement there, because you're absolutely right. When the
It's-
developer
the devil's in the
lays it out, they're going to come with an option of product to meet the facades, to meet the different layouts, to provide diversity to their buyers, but all within what they think fits well together.
But you're describing what's happening within the historic district.
And that's what I was gonna say. Like drive around the community, you see
It,
literally down the street from me on Metco, sorry, there's a little house. It's like, I can't believe someone lives there. It's just so small.
there's a little house bought across the street from me that is sold right now for $187,000. It would nearly fit in this room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
Well, the little
and-
yellow house up San Jacinto, like we have examples all over the community.
Yeah, that's.
Nobody even thinks twice about it.
Well,
Marcus, did you
yes,
have
we
a
have.
comment?
We've called it the King's Castle a couple of times.
Well,
Yeah.
you all are thinking on it's like it's already implemented how the developer's going to do it. Do we really need it in there and just limit the facades all and that's it, and don't put the diversity part of it?
And that's really what we're asking, whether this is
I'm-
important to you or not.
I'm not It's not important to me on diversity, but the facades, I would say to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree with
Because-
that.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean-
Diversity, I got it.
I mean, you're looking all over.
I'm going off of what you
Inside
said
the-
earlier.
inside the horseshoes.
We're at a level we're at. Let's stay there. Within the Medina County, seeing we're on the upper echelon. Let's stay there.
Well, again, this wouldn't for like a $200,000 house. There are people who are building 4,000 square foot homes that are 200,000.
Yeah.
Right. And then there are people who are building 950 square foot homes that are 200,000. The value of those two homes is totally different, even though the price is the same. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
And what I'm recommending and suggesting is that if you're going to go for the affordability side of things, that you go on that other side where you're looking at you achieve the affordability with really high quality but small footprints.
But don't you think
That's
that
how you maintain
well,
value.
I guess my counter to that would be when the market dictates it, the developers will do it. Why should we be the ones to dictate it? I guess that's
That's a great question.
Yeah, let them
Because-
come ask to do it.
Yeah. I mean,
Because it's too I'm not.
I mean, I
don't
get
wanna
it that-
sound too like this is. I don't want to sound too invested in this opinion, but I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
The reason someone like David Burge would say that that's important, and the reason that I was just listening to a broadcast by another city just the other day on a podcast, they were talking about what they're doing to try and keep the people that are from their community to stay in their community. And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to try and give a place for all of the community members to live in all of their stages of life, you have to have different housing. You have to have all the housing that represents all the stages of life. That's why. That's the short answer. That's why.
You got
You
3 or 4
want to
kids, you
encourage-
need that big house.
Yeah, because you want
Yeah,
to
well,
encourage
most
your-
people do start out in a bigger house and they
Sure,
stay in a
they
bigger house. I get that. I mean, because it'll be paid off by the time the kids are gone. And if they stay there in one spot, you're going to have grandpa and grandma living in the same 5-bedroom house they had when the kids were there. Now, can they upkeep that house? Probably not. Now, again, I guess
Well, what
I
does
get
your
back in,
23-year-old do when they get out of college and you want to
go get a job, get out of my house, and fill the refrigerator.
I literally I have a 23-year-old at home right now. I'm looking at what she's going to make at her first job. We
Yeah.
talked about her.
Well, I don't know. My kids lived at 18, so they were like,
That's fine. I just answered
No,
your
I-
question. But it's really this goes back to the value statement about the community. And either you value it or you don't. And it's not my place to tell you what to do.
Yeah, I get it.
That's some of the
Yeah.
back and forth.
And I have to put an argument to what you just said, because you've got these old folks in these 5-bedroom houses and they're big. One of them passes away. The one that's left, they don't want that big house anymore. You're going to go looking for something smaller, but you want to keep the quality that you've been living in the whole time. You don't want to have to.
well, then do we
Goes
go?
down.
Do we then move on to number 3 and say, what
Maybe.
about these auxiliary? I mean, that's
Oh,
where.
they're different. But
I almost didn't.
No,
I almost didn't even put this on here because I was like, I'm not even opening this conversation.
I think if we're looking at elements to put into a
Yeah.
development
Like,
agreement ask, they should be things that are not proven to be confrontational. So if we're debating about certain elements, it's probably
Yeah.
like, let's not say it's what we want, and let's let the developer or the market bring it to the table,
and is this
and then
okay?
they can focus on
And
the
then-
things that we do want.
Yeah, I know. That's what I realized.
I don't think we ought
It's
to
like-
put the ADUs
No.
in this at all. I mean, that.
Yeah, and
it's-
I think I think if we can't come to Jim's right. If we can't come to consensus among what we think about it, then we definitely shouldn't be putting it the development agreement policy to tell developers what we want.
Yeah,
So that's a different
ADUs are
conversation.
off the table.
ADUs are off the
On
table.
housing diversity, like I said, that third bullet, that's in all your development agreements now. I would strongly encourage you. to
Oh no, I agree with
Yeah.
3.
The other two are totally up to you whether you want to try and say anything about those. Like I said, I'm not too worried about it, frankly, because I think the state's going to take care of that for us at some level.
So, Brianna, do you have a clear consensus on
What
our
is
thoughts on the bullet points?
what? Okay,
Okay.
we took away. We're just leaving grid street layout on
Thumbs
the
up on that one.
And I
Thumbs
think
up
if we were to
on
put those as value statements,
facades.
on the
natural values,
facades,
Everything else is
communities
and everything else is
that
gone.
are not homogenous. Communities where there's a kid, it's not cookie cutter. We'll have to figure out how to say that.
Yeah.
it wouldn't necessarily be this. We
Right.
wouldn't say we're gonna limit the number of sites, it's just we value that, and then we'll let them bring.
What that means to them.
I like that.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, that was great. So the next step after this, so I'm going to compile all this feedback. I'm hoping to bring it to the next planning and zoning meeting. And like I said, so from what I got from tonight is very high level value statement. And then basically at the end, it's like, and we will also look at incentives if you do some of these things. So very high level. So I'm looking like at a 1-pager right now, which is great. And then I'll bring it to y'all so we can just refine that language. If there's anything that sticks out that y'all don't like, we can look at that and talk about it specifically. And then if we can come to a good consensus on it, I think that at that point, I will bring it to council to see what they think about it before getting because stuff like this, we have to go through our lawyers, we have to get the ordinance drawn up, we have to do all that stuff before I even start that process. I'll probably bring it to council to see if there's anything they want y'all to take a second look at, or if they have questions about anything. Like I said, it may be a couple back and forth, but I don't think. I mean,
About the DA policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What? No, you don't agree with that?
I don't think it has to go through that lengthy of a legal review,
Okay.
because it is just a policy statement. I think what we need to do is run through and run it right back through P&Z one more time.
Yeah.
At their next meeting with the language,
Mhm.
and then we'll take it to council.
Take it to council. Okay. And then we'll see what council says at that point. And then hopefully we'll have something on the books after that.
Because we're not going to be technical.
Did you want to try and do it at the next regular meeting, or are we going to do another workshop type setup to
I think
review?
since we had such good discussion tonight, yeah, it would just be during a regular meeting. Yeah, if
That's
y'all are
good for
okay
me.
with that.
Less,
If I get
more
a
is less, or less is more.
Yeah.
if I get a lot of feedback, because I'll try and send it out to y'all prior to the meeting. If I get a lot of feedback, then maybe I'll reevaluate at that point. But as of right now, I'll just be putting it on a regular meeting.
But I think just to clarify, I think what we're looking at is probably a 1 to 2 page development agreement policy. It will have some introductory language at the top about what we're doing with development agreements, why we are looking at them, and then it's just going to have value statements on it. And it literally, I don't think it'll be longer than 2 pages.
Will we then have to come back and talk more as far as the process of implementing one of these or getting one of them going? I mean, because I know we talked about public meetings and
Yeah.
running to council.
Let me take a stab at it to see if I can figure out how that process looks like on that 1 pager, because I would like to keep it the 1 page, but maybe we just at the end put like what our process will be, so we know and council knows and y'all know what that process looks like, and then it'll just be like bullet points of this is how it's going to go, and if y'all like it, then we'll keep it. If not, well, then we'll look at it at the point.
The process is when TA policy is developed, development agreement is proposed, staff validates that it meets the policy requirements, it's presented to P&Z for
Okay, then
basically,
that's what I was talking about. What would be the
then it's presented to the council for their validation input, and then a public engagement of some kind would be required before it's taken for ratification and
Yeah, that's
adoption by the city.
That's what I was talking about as far as the process.
My minutes are just gonna be bullet points for this too, until you come back with the specifics that you
I
rewrite.
think you're not easy.
I know.
I wanted all this discussion in those
Better
areas.
secretary would have a lot of those.
Ryan's going to vote not to approve out of spite.
I'm going to check her numbering system.
All right. So that covers discussion on future
will
agenda
resign
items. Is there anything
secretary.
else we need to
Well,
cover on that?
No, that's just part of the software. So unless y'all have something,
Anything else on future agenda items that you
You
guys?
have a development agreement that's gonna come to you for big time.
Oh, really?
yeah.
So
we're
this
gonna-
TA policy
So-
could be more timely. This is one that we looked at before, they had an agreement. I honestly do not know where council sits as far as the terms of the agreement. From a staff perspective, I didn't agree with the terms that the council agreed to, they were ready to give away too much, in my opinion. So it'd be very interesting to see how this council deals with it, but y'all are gonna get to look at it first.
Just for the east side of Victor Lane?
What's the?
Yeah, this is, we're calling it Victory Lane Agreement because that's the name of the partnership, but it's in Dura. They've had signs up for a long time.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
east of the car dealership.
Oh.
And 50 acre tract is largely just commercial, but they have proposed multifamily.
Was wondering when that was going to come along.
Y'all
We've
see
been
it?
gone since December, I think.
Yeah.
Here we are.
All right. With that, then we will move on to adjourn at 8:10.
Thanks, guys.
I got that.
Good.
Good meat.
So, for the last meeting, I wasn't here. Did you run it? How did?
Uh-huh.
She did a very good
So,
job.
oh yeah.
We're done in 30 minutes.
We ran.
Yeah.
We ran 30 minutes.
Uh-oh.
No, take it
It's not
back.
mine. You can take them. I'll tell Deborah who's
No.
She won't take.
Don't take them. Don't take them back. 'cause
Won't
I
give
need
up the
them.
candy
So
corn.
for the
I need
Oh, I gotta go find a
So
hamburger or
bad.
something. Kathy already told me. She said I ain't cooking, so you're gonna have to find something on the way home.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Again?
not.
You are.